Brother destroyed my Chinese books, faked migraines to control me, then begged for my help to land a gaming job with my girlfriend's father. My brother Brian was always a cheerful kid with a low IQ. He'd chuckle about spelling his name incorrectly and mock himself for still taking Algebra 1 in senior year. But then he failed to graduate. He suddenly realized that intelligence was his enemy, and that everybody who learned something was mocking him. Our grandma used to play these brain-training games on our computer, and Brian switched it off just as she reached her highest score. He even discarded our 7-year-old cousin's Scrabble set, which she had received for Christmas after losing to her. When I began learning Chinese to impress my crush, I became his next target. I tried to be understanding at first. I avoided practicing in front of him and watched the videos with headphones on, but it wasn't enough. He'd throw a fit when he saw my Duolingo alerts, accusing me of bragging to make him feel foolish. I tried to explain that it was for a girl, but he claimed that foreign languages were my attempt to rub my working brain in his face. Soon, he began segregating areas of the house. The living and dining rooms became a Chinese-free zone since he needed to unwind after his stint as Kroger's door opener. I was rather annoyed. But I simply transferred everything to my bedroom. Close the door and put on your headphones. Surely everything was good now, and I could practice my Chinese in peace, right? Wrong. Before I knew it, Brian had started recording my study sessions in a headache notebook, alleging that the Chinese coming through the walls was causing migraines. He'd text Mom photographs of himself holding his head as I was practicing. I informed him I was using headphones and only writing, not conversing. But he claimed simply knowing that I was insulting his disability was upsetting. Brian was my parents' special little boy, so they took his side. Dad grabbed me aside and said, "Your brother has challenges you'll never understand. Is impressing some girl really worth making him feel worthless?" Mom was much worse. She pretended I was abusing him on purpose and suggested I learn Chinese at the library since family comes first. And will knowing a few sentences make the difference between being rejected and her saying yes? I tried to hold my position, but before I knew it, I was sitting in our back garden learning Chinese because it was the only way Brian felt involved, but I really enjoyed the garden. It was springtime, so it got warmer, and the sound of the wind helped me focus. But then Brian was sacked from his work as a door opener. He had only ever had one job. On the day of, he stormed into the back garden and began tearing up my printouts. I attempted to shove him away, but he was 6 inches taller and 5 years older, and he knocked me to the ground. He destroyed all of my materials right there on the spot. I was still crying outside when I heard him in the house arguing with Mom. "It's his fault I lost the job, Mom." The joke I made at the Chinese customer was because of the Chinese he's learning. I watched Mom hesitate, but she came out minutes later. "Brian is correct, honey. Your crush isn't worth destroying your brother's livelihood." I stared at her in surprise as she crouched down and assisted me in gathering what remained of my material. All sorts of Chinese study were now prohibited in our living space during Brian's waking hours. "It's okay," Mom said. "You can practice from 5 a.m. to 6 a.m. before school." I remember waking up at 4:45 a.m. For the next 3 days, I'll be sitting at the table, learning through my applications. I was sleep-deprived, and my head hurt from staring at the television in complete darkness. Brian was alerted when lights were turned on any place in the home before waking time. On day 4, Brian had a full meltdown at breakfast. Apparently, even knowing I was learning Chinese while he slept gave him nightmares about being too stupid to exist. He demanded that I leave the house completely if I wanted to practice. "Go to that 24-hour diner if Chinese matters so much," he told me. My parents scarcely looked up from their plates. I could tell they were content to be onlookers. "Starting tomorrow, you'll be—" Brian spoke as if it was already decided that I'd spend my nights in a diner. I cut him off in mid-sentence. "Shut up, I'm not going." He looked at me as if I had extra heads. "What did you just— Do you have any idea why I'm learning Chinese?" I cut him off again. "Yeah. It's for that little crush of yours." "Not just that," was my reply. However, I could tell he was skeptical. I raised my voice. "This was never about making you feel stupid, Brian." "Yes, it was. Would you listen for once in your life?" I interrupted for the 3rd time. "Clara's dad owns a gaming company," I said. My voice shook. "He literally exclusively hires family friends because he believes they are more trustworthy than random applicants. You sit here every night saying you'd kill for a gaming career, bragging about knowing every game, developer, and piece of industry news." Brian's expression changed. If I dated Clara, you'd be at family dinners, you'd be at barbecues, her dad would meet you, see how passionate you are about gaming, and probably offer you something. But now I stared him directly in the eyes. Now I'm never mentioning your name. And when her dad asks about my family, which he will, I'm telling him exactly what kind of person my brother is. Someone who'd rather destroy my first relationship than let me be happy. Someone who weaponizes his disability to control everyone around him. The silence was terrible. Mom put her fork back on her dish when it came halfway to her mouth. She squirmed in her seat and looked between me and Brian before finally asking if what I had stated about the gaming company was correct. The words came out slowly, as if she were testing each one. Brian did not respond to her. He simply took out his phone and began browsing through one of favorite games, the one where you match colored blocks that he played for hours every night. His breathing became hard, and I could see his hands squeezing the phone so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Nobody spoke during the rest of dinner. I went to bed that night hoping I'd finally gotten through to them. The next morning, I awoke to discover Brian seated on the floor outside my bedroom door, holding that ridiculous headache journal. He looked up when I opened the door and stated he wanted to speak, but his tone was different, as if he was asking rather than telling. I stepped over him and went downstairs, but he scrambled to follow me. He kept talking as we walked down the stairs, claiming he had been up all night looking at the game company's website. Junior game testers were being hired, and no degree was required. Simply passion and knowledge of gaming. His voice cracked as he stated that he possessed both of those things. I walked into the kitchen and got a bowl from the cabinet and cereal from the pantry. Brian waited at the doorway, watching me pour the milk and waiting for me to say something. After everything he had put me through for months, him now requesting my assistance felt terrible. I eventually inquired what his purpose was. He took a step into the kitchen, and his words seemed to sting him when he said he required me to introduce him to Clara's father. He truly murmured, "Please." Mom entered the kitchen and she looked dreadful, with black circles under her eyes. She claimed she hadn't slept because she couldn't stop thinking about what I had said about damaging my first relationship. I turned to face both of them, clutching my cereal bowl. I told him it wasn't just about the relationship. It was about respect. Because I was 16, not 6. And I deserved to pursue my interests without being destroyed. Brian slapped his diary down on the counter, causing the salt shaker to leap. He exclaimed, "That's fine." He fabricated the headaches out of jealousy. Even he seemed astonished that he had stated it out. Dad walked in the doorway, already dressed for work, holding his tie and briefcase. He stated that he had heard what Brian had just revealed and that we will all address it tonight when he returned home from work. Brian avoided eye contact the rest of the morning, while Mom made breakfast in perfect silence, even though Dad had already left for work early. I collected my backpack and went to school, where I discovered Henry waiting by my locker, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and saw the bags under my eyes. I told him everything about Brian, including how he had been faking the migraines and how Dad had heard him confess. Henry shook his head, wondering if my parents would finally do something about it. I shrugged as I grabbed my history textbook, because I had no idea what was going to happen, but Mom seemed different last night, as if she was finally recognizing what was going on. We were about to leave for first period when Clara appeared at my locker, holding her Chinese workbook. She grinned and said she'd heard I was learning Chinese, which was great, and asked if we could practice together at lunch. My heart began pounding so hard that I was afraid she would hear it, but I managed to nod and say I'd enjoy that. Henry smiled and made an excuse about needing to get to class early before walking away to give us some space. This was exactly what I had been striving toward. All those early mornings studying in the dark and hours spent in the garden before Brian destroyed my materials. Clara and I talked for another minute about which apps we were using before the bell sounded, signaling that we needed to divide for class. The day dragged on, and all I could think about was lunch with Clara and whatever Dad had planned for tonight. When I arrived home that evening, Dad was already there, tie unfastened and sleeves rolled up, sitting in the living room with Mom and Brian. Why did Brian believe his joke about Chinese clients was related to his brother learning the language? That leap in logic was weird, as if he was looking for someone to blame other than himself. The room that had previously been Brian's Chinese-free zone now resembled a courthouse, with Dad sitting forward in his chair, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. He began by stating that Brian acknowledged to fabricating his symptoms, which included manipulation and abuse. We'd never used the word abuse in our family before, so it hung in the air like a toxin. Brian's face grew red and he sprang up from the couch, saying that he was the one with the disability and that he couldn't learn like I could, while pointing at me as if I were the criminal here. Mom finally spoke up in a hushed voice, explaining that having a disability did not give him the right to manipulate people and that she believed she had been enabling him. I couldn't help but chuckle bitterly when I recalled her that she had forced me to study Chinese at 5 a.m. in utter darkness because Brian claimed he was having nightmares over it. Brian had gone entirely quiet 3 days later, spending the most of his time locked in his room with his laptop, which was unusual given that he generally watched TV in the living room from morning till night. Mom would bring him meals on trays, but she stopped chopping his food into bite-sized pieces. She simply placed the plate at his door and walked away. I could hear him typing away at all hours, printing documents on our old printer, which produced a horrible grinding noise every time it spewed out a page. Clara and I had started meeting during lunch to practice Chinese together, sitting behind the large oak tree beyond the cafeteria where no one else went. She would bring these flashcards that her mother had made, and we'd question each other while eating our sandwiches, and she was far superior to me, but she never made me feel inadequate. One day, she said that her father was seeking for game testers for their new project and asked if I knew anyone who was particularly into gaming. I froze with my sandwich halfway to my mouth, since I knew someone. But a part of me wanted to say no, to punish Brian for everything he had put me through. But then I considered what it would mean for our family if he truly landed a job he was passionate about. How things might alter. That Friday night after supper, I was walking to my room when Brian stopped me in the hallway, pushing a big stack of documents at me that he had clearly spent hours putting together. The portfolio contained every game Miller Interactive had ever created, along with comprehensive analysis, images printed in color despite Mom's complaints about printing costs, and lengthy lines discussing game mechanics and story development. I looked through page after page, amazed at how amazing it was, how he discovered details about the games I'd never considered while having played several of them myself. He stood there watching me read, shifting his weight from foot to foot like a small child awaiting exam results. When I looked up at him, he quietly stated that he was not foolish about everything, only most things. And it was the most vulnerable I had ever seen him in my life. The following week, I finally mentioned Brian to Clara while we were training, gently explaining that my brother was obsessed with her father's games and knew more about them than anybody I'd ever met. She quickly perked up, stating her father enjoyed meeting sincere fans and that Brian should come to their weekend cookout. When I arrived home and told Brian about the invitation, his eyes welled up with tears, and he kept asking whether I was truly doing this for him after everything that had happened. I told him I was doing it because it was the right thing to do, but I made it clear that if he embarrassed me or made any comments against Chinese people, we would be done for good. And he nodded so fiercely, I thought his head would fall off. The BBQ day arrived much sooner than I had anticipated, and Brian spent the entire morning in his room trying on various outfits. I could hear him over the wall, practicing conversation starters with Mom. We repeatedly told him to relax and be himself. She helped him choose his nicest trousers and even ironed his favorite gaming shirt with a throwback controller design on it. They spent over 3 hours discussing ideas that he could bring up if the conversation became awkward. Brian's hands were so shaky when we eventually got in the car to drive to Clara's house that he couldn't even clasp his seatbelt. Throughout the ride, he continued asking me what-if questions about making mistakes or saying stupid things. When we arrived at this big property with lush lawn and a 3-car garage, Brian just froze in the passenger seat. He wouldn't get out of the car for almost 5 minutes and kept saying, maybe this was a bad idea. His typical swagger, in which he'd push everyone around, was vanished, and he looked like a scared little kid. I told him to be the version of himself who enjoys gaming, not the version who hates homework. He nodded and eventually stepped out, but his legs shook as we proceeded up the driveway. Clara answered the door with a great smile and took us to the backyard, where her father was grilling burgers. Mr. Carter swung around with a bright smile and shook both of our hands as if we were major business colleagues. Mr. Carter's face lighted up as Brian said that he had beaten every achievement in their most recent game. He began asking Brian about specific mechanics and boss fights, and Brian burst out laughing as he discussed frame rates and difficulty curves. All of his stuttering and trepidation vanished as he outlined his technique for the last boss, who reportedly only 2% of gamers had defeated. Mr. Carter was leaning in, asking follow-up questions, and even calling over another firm employee to hear Brian's perspective. They stood there for maybe an hour, just chatting about game design, user retention numbers, and other things I didn't understand. Clara took my hand, and we proceeded to buy dinner while they continued to talk by the grill. 2 hours into the celebration, I peered across the yard and saw Brian still talking to Mr. Carter and 2 other employees. Clara grabbed my hand and said my brother was very knowledgeable, which made me uncomfortable because I'd never heard anyone admire him before. We stayed until nearly 9 p.m., and when we returned home, Mom was waiting in the living room to inquire how everything went. Brian couldn't stop gushing about Mr. Carter's want to see his portfolio of game evaluations he had written. Mom started bawling over the phone with me later that evening, claiming Brian hadn't been this pleased in years. She kept thanking me for providing him this opportunity, and expressing hope that things would finally improve for our family. I was torn between being thrilled for him and angry about the months of torment he put me through. I told her he had to earn this opportunity, and that one nice day would not erase what he had done to me. She became silent and said she understood, but I could tell she just wanted things to return to normal. The next morning, I was barely awake when Brian barged into my room without knocking. He was holding his phone and nearly leaping up and down, claiming that Mr. Carter had emailed him about taking a real exam. Not simply a talk, but a gaming knowledge test that may lead to an internship with the company. His excitement was so tremendous that I worried he'd pass out from not breathing properly in between words. I told him that was fantastic, but I made sure to remind him that it all originated from my friendship with Clara. He tried to damage my relationship by ripping up my Chinese homework and forbidding me from studying at home. His expression changed from pure joy to something I'd never seen on him before. It was as if he was experiencing true shame for the first time. He sat down on the couch and rested his head in his hands. He remained silent for around 30 seconds, which was the longest I had ever seen him go without speaking. When he glanced up, his eyes were watery, and he asked me how he could fix things. I didn't have an answer prepared because, frankly, I never expected him to care about making things right. Over the next week, something strange happened in our home. Brian began studying for the test as if his life depended on it. But not in his normal manner, in which everyone had to suffer alongside him. He wore headphones, worked normal hours, and did not require us all to be silent while he was working. He'd set up at the kitchen table with his laptop and notebooks, jotting down everything he knew about various game firms and their history. Mom kept giving him snacks and drinks, but he'd merely nod and continue working, making no fuss about needing special treatment. Dad spotted it first, and called me away one evening while Brian was in his room revising his notes. He said it was like having a different son, and that he should have intervened years ago instead of allowing things to become so terrible. The apology felt strange coming from him after all this time, but I could tell he meant it. Brian became concerned 3 days before the test, pacing around the house and asking me what Mr. Carter would ask him. He vomited twice before breakfast on the day of the test. He couldn't keep anything down, and his hands were shaking so badly that his mother had to button his shirt for him. He kept wondering what would happen if he failed, if he was too foolish even for this opportunity. I told him he wasn't stupid about games, that Mr. Carter had already seen it, and that he should just believe what he knew. The words were weird to say after everything he'd put me through, but I meant them. He left for the test, appearing as if he was about to pass out, yet determined. The next 2 weeks spent waiting for results were the craziest our family had ever experienced. Brian was nervous, but not rude about it. I did not take it out on anyone. Just continued refreshing his email every 10 minutes. Brian and Mom spent 3 hours practicing conversation topics before the cookout. That's a lot of careful planning for someone who normally just demands. How did his brain transition from memorizing game details to recalling social rules? Mom backed him without babying him, reminding him that no matter what occurred, they were proud of him for trying. Instead of hiding in his office, Dad joined us for supper and inquired about everyone's day. Things were going well at school too. Clara and I were officially together, and everyone knew about it. Henry kept joking that I had turned familial turmoil into a relationship strategy, and he wasn't entirely wrong. Clara thought Brian's situation was bizarre, but she was delighted something good may come out of it. Mrs. Patel approached me between classes one day, saying my instructors had observed I seemed happier lately and wanted to make sure everything was fine at home. She'd been concerned about me since sophomore year, when I arrived at school fatigued from my early morning study sessions. I told her things were actually improving, and she looked relieved. 2 weeks and 3 days after the exam, we were all eating dinner when Brian's phone rang. He grabbed it so quickly that he knocked over his water glass, and his hands shook worse than on exam day. He tried but couldn't access the email, so he thrust the phone at Mom and asked her to read it. She opened it and began reading aloud about how happy they were to offer him a position in their game testing department. Brian totally lost it. He began sobbing harder than I had seen since he was perhaps 8 years old. He kept repeating he understood, that someone wanted him for his brain, not despite it. Mom was also crying. Dad jumped up and hugged him, something I hadn't seen in years. Even I felt something in my chest when he realized he was valuable to someone other than his family. Dad walked straight to the kitchen and returned with a bottle of champagne we'd been saving since New Year's, which he popped right there in the living room while Mom wiped tears from her face and pulled Brian into tight hugs every few minutes. Brian sat on the couch, reading the offer letter repeatedly, his finger tracing each line as if he was afraid the words might change if he looked away. And I saw him mouth the wage amount at least 20 times before Dad poured everyone a glass, including half of one for me. The entire experience felt like seeing a foreign family, as if aliens had replaced the people I'd known for years. Because Dad was discussing Brian's future, and Mom was planning his first day rather than merely worried about his emotions. We sat up until almost midnight talking about work, games and everything but Chinese, disabilities, and other issues that had pulled us apart for months. I had already gone to bed at 11 p.m. when I heard the knock on my door. Soft at first, then slightly louder. When I opened it, Brian was standing there, more uncomfortable than I'd ever seen him, shifting his weight and staring at the floor. He began speaking quickly, saying he had been envious of everything about me. Not just the Chinese, but how I learned things without trying, made friends without thinking about it, and accomplished things that seemed impossible to him. His voice cracked as he revealed he wanted to punish me for being everything he couldn't be, for having a functioning brain and for making him feel shattered simply by existing. I told him I knew, that I'd worked it out months before, but knowing why didn't make it better. That he'd made my life horrible, ruined my belongings, and gotten me tossed out of my own house at 5 o'clock in the morning. He agreed and took out his phone, showing me a shopping cart full of Chinese language books and applications he'd been looking into, stating he planned to use his first salary to replace everything he'd wrecked. And given the possibility of Chinese clientele, I could teach him some fundamental work words. Brian spent the next 2 weeks in a strange adjustment phase, practicing saying hello and thank you in Chinese while getting ready for work, and wearing his new Miller Interactive t-shirt around the home like it was made of gold. For the first time in my memory, Mom started telling him no. For example, she pushed him attend his first team meeting despite his desire to skip it. Dad stayed in the room throughout family dinners rather than disappearing to his office. Everything felt new but fragile, as if we were all learning how to be a family again. And when Henry returned 3 weeks later, he paused at the doorway and looked around, as if he had entered the wrong house. He kept emphasizing that the place seemed different, lighter, as if everyone could finally breathe without fear of setting off a bomb. And he even mentioned that I was doing my Chinese homework at the kitchen table rather than hiding. Things were going well until about a month into the job, when Brian came home early one Tuesday, looking like someone had died, his face white and his hands quivering as he informed us he'd made a significant error in testing that may land him in trouble. He'd overlooked a significant bug because he was bragging to his team leader about knowing some arcane gaming mechanic, became distracted, and accepted something that broke the entire system, costing them hours of labor. But instead of throwing things, yelling, or blaming me, he sat down at the table and asked what he should do, how he could fix it, and how he could demonstrate to them that he could learn from mistakes, rather than just being the stupid kid who destroyed everything. I grabbed my laptop and sat next to him at the kitchen table, which would have been unimaginable just months before. We spent the next hour drafting and retyping his email to his boss, with me advising him how to take responsibility without seeming weak, and how to provide solutions rather than simply apologizing. His hands shook as he typed, but he persisted, asking me to verify his spelling, tone, and whether he sounded stupid. When he finally pushed submit, he gazed at the screen, as if he expected the world to end. The next morning, his boss called while I was eating breakfast, and Brian put it on speaker without asking, his face as pale as paper. Mr. Harris's voice filled our kitchen, and I saw Brian's jaw drop when, rather than firing him, the guy said he was impressed that Brian admitted his error and came up with remedies. That most individuals simply create excuses, and that this demonstrated genuine improvement. After the call, Brian just sat there startled, and I realized something had changed between us. He wasn't the brother who destroyed my belongings anymore, but someone who needed my assistance, and could take it without making it about his disability. 2 months passed in that manner. He asked for help with work emails, I taught him basic professional stuff, and neither of us mentioned how strange this reversal was. At Sunday supper, Mom was serving dessert. Brian cleared his throat and explained that he had been saving money to move out. Mom's fork clattered on her plate, while Dad's coffee mug stalled halfway to his mouth. Brian continued to talk, adding that he had found a studio apartment near work with 2 roommates who also worked in gaming. Guys who didn't care about his IQ or the fact that he had never graduated, as long as he knew every game ever created. Mom started crying, but not the angry cries I was expecting. It was as if she were seeing her young bird leave the nest 20 years later. Over the next few weeks we packed his belongings together, looking through boxes of old games and toys and discovering items we'd forgotten existed. He pulled up our old Dark Souls disc and asked whether I recalled helping him fight that one boss before everything went wrong, when we were just brothers playing video games together. I remembered. We both did. The invitation to Clara's family's annual company party was sent to each of us. But this time, Brian would be there as an employee, not as my brother following along. The night before the party, I watched him practice his presentation about game testing in front of the bathroom mirror, fumbling over words but determined to finish. At the actual party, he stood in front of 50 people, including Mr. Carter, and began discussing bug detection. His voice shook at first, but then settled into a cadence as he recounted how his unique style of thinking allowed him to spot things that other testers missed. Mr. Carter was grinning, like a pleased father. Mr. Reynolds, the head of testing, then contacted me and told me that my brother had unique insights, and that his perspective was an asset because he approached games differently than everyone else. Brian spent the entire way home talking about the various problems he'd discovered in games over the years, and how he could perhaps be excellent at something. And for the first time in ages, Mom and Dad listened to him as if he were an adult rather than a damaged child. 3 weeks later, we were standing in Brian's room on moving day, wrapping his gaming posters in bubble wrap and sorting through old controllers and headphones he had accumulated over the years. The apartment he selected was only 20 minutes away, but it felt like he was going to another country, and Mom kept stopping to wipe her eyes as she picked up another box. She finally broke down fully while we were loading the vehicle, sobbing into Dad's shoulder and telling him she had babied him for too long and felt she was protecting him. But truly, she had been holding him back for years. Brian's new housemates showed up in a beat-up Honda. When they learned he was seeking for a place, 2 guys from the gaming company offered to share it. And they quickly began laughing with him about which console was better while grabbing boxes, as if they had known him forever. I watched them treat him like he was just another 20-something guy moving in with his friends. Not a person with a disability or special needs. Just Brian, who happens to be really skilled at spotting bugs in games. As we finished loading everything and Brian was about to get into the car, he took me aside and pushed an envelope into my hand, staring down at his shoes and instructing me not to open it until he left. Brian's journey from trashing Chinese books to purchasing replacements with his first salary demonstrated a total 180-degree shift in his perception of his sibling. The house felt strange that night at supper, with his vacant chair remaining at the table, like if someone had died, yet we could still text him. Mom continued calling him for dinner before catching herself. After they went to bed, I opened the envelope in my room and discovered $300 in cash, as well as a statement scribbled in his untidy handwriting that stated he was the disabled one, but he also disabled me. And he apologized, and asked if I might teach him some Chinese after he got situated. My hands shook as I read it 3 times, carefully folded it, and stored it in my desk drawer with my old Chinese papers. A week later he called as I was completing my schoolwork, virtually shrieking over the phone about how he made spaghetti for the first time. It was bad and stuck to the saucepan, but it was his terrible spaghetti, which he made himself without any assistance. Clara and I went to see him the following weekend, and he walked us around the apartment like it was a palace, pointing off his gaming setup, the kitchen where he'd burned the spaghetti, and his bedroom, which was already a disaster of clothes and game boxes. His roommates were playing a new release, and one of them glanced up and said, "I was the brother who got him the connection, and thanks," because Brian was actually cool, and had already found 3 major bugs they'd missed during testing. We ended up spending hours playing together, passing controllers and talking over strategies. Brian wasn't attempting to control everything or prove he was wiser, he was simply sharing what he knew, and actively listening when Clara offered an alternative approach to a boss fight. This was who he could have been all along if we hadn't been so concerned with what he couldn't achieve, rather than what he could. If Mom and Dad hadn't surrounded him with bubble wrap and told him the world was too difficult for him to navigate alone. 2 weeks later, Mom and Dad went to see him for dinner and returned home looking 10 years younger, going on and on about how he'd cooked them chicken that was only slightly burned, showed them his pay stub from his first real paycheck, and how his roommates had said he was already one of the best testers on the team. Following that visit, I began practicing Chinese in the living room, with my textbook sprawled across the coffee table and Mom reading a magazine on the couch nearby. No one moaned, made faces, or claimed migraines anymore. Brian would often video call me in the nights and ask me to teach him basic phrases while he sat in his little apartment kitchen, his roommate's cat prowling through the ground. He was bad with tones and constantly mixed up simple words, yet he'd chuckle at himself and try again, making notes in his sloppy handwriting. The following week at school, I went to Mrs. Patel's office and informed her everything that had happened since the court case. She leaned back in her chair and mentioned that individuals had to hit rock bottom before they could change, and that our family had found a way out. Brian improved at his job week after week for 3 months. Until one Thursday evening, my phone rang as I was completing homework. Brian was crying so hard that I couldn't understand him at first. But then he found out that he'd been promoted to senior tester. His voice trembled when he claimed they appreciated his brain, the different brain that saw things other testers didn't. That Sunday, we began what became a new tradition. Everyone gathered at our place for dinner. Brian drove himself over in the used Honda he bought with his own money and walked through the door with a confidence I'd never seen. We ate Mom's lasagna and talked about everyday topics like work, school and weather. Brian cleared his throat at supper and announced that he had signed up for online classes. He replied it was just fundamental stuff and he wanted to study again at his own pace. Dad stepped up, raised his glass, and gave a brief toast to second chances and fresh starts. We all raised our glasses, including Brian, who preferred apple juice over champagne or any other type of alcohol. Clara showed over for dessert, bringing fresh cookies she had baked with her mother. Brian thanked her in Chinese, distorting the pronunciation but speaking with genuine sincerity. She smiled and gently adjusted his tone, and he chuckled at himself without any of his usual embarrassment or fury. While Mom was cutting the pie, Brian revealed that he might flunk the classes but wanted to try anyhow, because failure wasn't the worst thing anymore. It was the absence of effort. As everyone prepared to go and Clara assisted Mom with the dishes, Brian pulled me aside near the front door. He gazed at me for a long time before saying simply that he was glad for the opportunity, for my patience, and for not giving up on him totally, even when he was at his worst. I saw him drive away to his own life a few minutes later, while Mom and Dad waved from the doorway like proud parents do. The house felt peaceful in a way it hadn't before. I sat in the living room, practicing my Chinese characters while my parents read nearby. Nobody is claiming areas, keeping books of grievances, or demanding that anyone leave. We were still working out how to be a family without all of the old poisonous dynamics, but we were learning together, making errors and trying again, much like Brian with his Chinese phrases. Creating something better one day at a time. I said, man, I had a great time hanging out and experiencing all of stuff with you today. Seriously, it's been a great ride. I cannot wait to do it again soon. If you made it to the finish, please leave a remark. I enjoy reading all of your remarks. My family uninvited me from Christmas at the $8,000 chalet I paid for, so I canceled it and watched their perfect holiday dreams collapse. My name is Patrick. I'm 28, and my family's connection with me has always been complex. From the outside, we appear to be the picture-perfect suburban family. Dad, with his tidy business attire and know-it-all attitude. Mom, who insists on keeping the peace yet always appears to support him. My younger sister Vanessa, the golden kid, could set the house on fire and still be described as spirited rather than reckless. Then there's me, the one who always worked hard, tried to keep my head down, yet still got treated like an outsider. For as far as I can remember, Christmas has served as their platform. Each year followed the same pattern. Vanessa received the spotlight. Dad delivered platitudes about family values, and Mom preoccupied herself with making everything appear ideal while ignoring the less-than-perfect comments hurled my way. I learned to deal with the passive-aggressive jabs, comparisons, and tiny reminders that I wasn't quite one of them as Vanessa was. However, over the last year, I began to suspect that something had changed. I had a solid job and a steady paycheck, and for once, I wanted to contribute to the holiday to make it feel like I wasn't simply a bystander in their world. That's how the chalet arrived. I found this lovely cabin-style chalet in the Highlands. Snow all around, a wood-burning fireplace, and large windows facing out into the slopes. It was the type of vacation destination that people put on postcards. I spent weeks looking for the appropriate spot, calculating my budget, and finally booking the entire place. $8,000 went quickly, but it was worthwhile because I hoped this year would be different. Maybe they'd realize how much I cared and wanted to be a bigger part of the family Christmas ritual. I also texted Dad the hotel confirmation so he could boast to his buddies. He didn't thank me. He just remarked, "Good. That's the least you could do." At the time I dismissed it. That was just Dad, never giving me credit and never saying no. However, when December approached, the Fishers reappeared. Vanessa kept saying it was her chalet trip, as if I had planned it for her. She even mentioned it on social media, stating, "Can't wait for our family Christmas at the chalet Dad rented." That stings. I was not even mentioned. When I questioned her why she phrased it that way, she simply smiled and said, "Relax, Patrick. No one cares who booked it. It's all Dad's idea anyway." That should have been my first major clue. I still wanted to believe. I hoped that once we arrived, they might surprise me with some gratitude. Instead, everything came to a head on a typical Wednesday night in early December. I had swung by my folks' place after work to drop off some boxes of decorations I had bought up. They were sitting in the living room sipping wine as usual, and Vanessa was spread on the couch, discussing what outfits she would bring. I was about to add how I had stocked up on supplies for the chalet when Dad interrupted. "You're not invited to Christmas this year," he yelled, as if he were instructing me to take out the trash. I froze, the words barely registering at first. "What?" I said, wondering whether I had misheard. "You heard me," he replied bluntly, swirling his wine glass. "It's going to be a family-only Christmas. We don't need complications. You can do your own thing." I recall giggling under my breath, more out of surprise than amusement. "Is it just the family? I am literally your son." Vanessa sneered at me from the sofa. "Dad just means it's going to be less stressful without you. Don't make a scene, Patrick." And Mom, sweet, always neutral Mom, just gave me a pitying look, as if I were a stranger looking for a place to stay. "Maybe it's for the best, dear. We want peace this year." I can't put into words how I felt at the time. Yes, it hurts. Betrayal, of course. But largely it was this cold clarity, like if a curtain had fallen and I could finally see them for who they truly were. For years, I had been pursuing bits of validation, attempting to fit in, and in one remark, Dad made it clear that I never did. I did not argue, I did not beg. I just nodded, laid the box of decorations down on the floor, and said, "Fine." They undoubtedly assumed I was upset, that I'd go home and cry about being excluded, but in reality, my thoughts were already moving. I remembered the chalet reservation that was in my inbox, the one booked in my name, using my card and money. And as I walked out of their house that night, with their smug expressions behind me, I realized something. They thought they had Christmas wrapped up, that they could obliterate me as if I were nothing. They had no idea what was coming. That night, I got down at my laptop, opened up the bank transfers, and secretly transferred the holiday monies I had sent to Dad back into my account. $8,000 fell back into its proper location. Then I opened the chalet reservation, and with a simple click, canceled it entirely. No penalty. It was still early enough. The best aspect was that the booking was in Dad's name on paper since I wanted him to feel involved. But the payments were mine, so when the cancellation went through, the credit was returned to me. I didn't tell them, of course. I went to bed with a peculiar calm, partly expecting a fallout. The next morning, my phone lit up like a Christmas tree. I had 31 missed calls, 12 voicemails, and one message that stopped me in my tracks. And that's when things really started to disintegrate. My father sent the message, which was short and to the point, as if he still had control of the situation. "Call me back. Now." I didn't. I sat there with my coffee, reading through his prior voicemails, each of which was angrier than the last. First, there was confusion. "Patrick, there's a mistake. The chalet reservation isn't showing up on my account. Call them and fix it." The tone switched to annoyance. "This isn't funny. If you're pulling some stunt, you better undo it immediately." Finally, the inevitable wrath. "You think this makes you clever? You've embarrassed me, Patrick. Do you understand that? Fix this. Now." He was shamed. That was what mattered most. Not the fact that his son was reportedly not invited to Christmas. Not the sheer chutzpah of dumping me after I'd paid for everything. No, the main sin here was that his friends and extended family would soon learn that the big chalet trip was not going to happen. His pride had been harmed, and in his society, it was unforgivable. Vanessa began contacting me about midday. Her tone was harsher than Dad's, less furious and more entitled. "Are you seriously doing this to us? You promised we'd have Christmas at the chalet. All my friends know about it, Patrick. I already told everyone. Do you even care what this does to me?" I could almost hear her whimpering voice through the text. I didn't respond. Silence was more powerful than any words I could have typed back. That nightfall, however, the real games began. Mom arrived at my place unexpectedly, bearing a casserole, as she often did when she wanted to soften terrible news. She let herself in using the spare key I hadn't aware she still possessed. "Patrick," she murmured with a studied, charming tone. "I believe we got off to a bad start last night. You are aware of your father's harsh language at times. He didn't say you weren't welcome. It was simply tension talking." I stared at her, really curious. "So now I'm invited?" Her smile faded, but she continued. Certainly. But only if you resolve the chalet issue. Your father's reputation is at stake, and many are looking forward to this trip." It would mean so much to everyone if you just handled it quietly. The manipulation was so obvious that I almost laughed. It was not about me being included. It was about me cleaning up their messes. I inquired, "And if I don't?" She placed the casserole on my counter, folded her hands together as if praying, and groaned. "Then I'm afraid you'll be making things very difficult for this family. Do you really want to ruin Christmas for your sister?" It was back there. Vanessa prioritizes her happiness above all else. I remembered birthdays when Mom received extravagant gifts while I received utilitarian items such as socks or notebooks. I remembered when she crashed my car and my parents advised me not to be selfish because Vanessa had been through enough stress. The same trend was repeating. My sacrifice. Her spotlight. I did not give Mom the reaction she expected. I just remarked, "Thanks for the casserole," and accompanied her to the door. She stared at me with a sad little expression, as if I were the problem child throwing a tantrum, and said, "Your father is very disappointed in you." That night, Vanessa connected me to a new group chat she had formed. The name of it is Christmas at the Chalet Snowflake Christmas Tree. The irony almost killed me. She must not have understood I had canceled everything because her messages were full of gushing about ski suits, champagne, and Instagram photographs she'd take by the fireplace. Dad said, "I'll handle the wine. Don't worry." Mom responded emojis. It was as if they were attempting to make me disappear, despite the fact that I was the one who made it possible. Finally, Vanessa tagged me. "Patrick, could you please send the updated booking confirmation? Dad wants to ensure that the dinner reservations are set up." I glanced at the message for a long time, unsure what to do. Every instinct pushed me to tell the truth right then in the chat, to expose them as the greedy, entitled family they'd always been. But something inside me said it wasn't time. Not yet. Allow them to spin their dreams a little longer. Let them believe that everything was under control. The longer they dangled on the hook, the more satisfying it would be when reality finally snapped tight. The anxiety just increased from there. Over the next week, they began throwing signals to extended family members, boasting about the chalet trip and implying that Vanessa was somehow hosting it. One of my aunts even contacted me, perplexed, saying, "Your sister told me you're not coming this year. That can't be right, can it?" When I gently told her that Dad had uninvited me, she gasped and exclaimed, "But you're the one who paid." Word spread. I could sense their immaculate little facade breaking around the edges. And with each crack, their texts became more frenzied and desperate. But nothing prepared me for the night Dad personally arrived at my apartment door. Not with rage this time, but with something far worse. False charm. He stood there in his pressed coat, holding a bottle of wine, as if we were longtime friends. "Patrick, son," he spoke smoothly. "We need to talk about this chalet situation. I know you're upset, but let's be adults. We can work something out." That's when I knew they weren't simply panicked. They were scheming. Dad did not go inside right away. He stayed at the doorway like a salesman who refuses to leave until you sign on the dotted line. He smiled. But it wasn't a warm one. It was the tight, calculating style that I had seen him use in business meetings when I was younger. The sort that said he was already planning 10 steps ahead, and I was just another pawn. "Can I come in?" he inquired finally. I hesitated, but curiosity got the best of me. I opened the door wider to let him enter. He placed the bottle of wine on my counter without asking, as if he owned the place. We sat across from one another, the stillness lengthening. Then he leaned forward, elbows on knees, and said, "Listen, about what I said the other night. Uninvited. That was harsh." I was frustrated. "You know how things get." I did not respond. I just let him continue talking. He shifted in his seat. "Your sister's been under a lot of stress lately. Her job's shaky. She's worried about money, and this chalet trip, well, it's important for her. She wants to impress her friends, keep her reputation intact. You understand, don't you?" There it was, the speech I had been expecting. Vanessa's sentiments are once again the #1 priority. My role was to fix her life. To ensure she always looked wonderful while I remained unseen. Dad cleared his throat and leaned back. "So, here's what we'll do. You'll rebook the chalet, use your card again, I know you can afford it, and put it under my name so I can manage things properly. In exchange, we will discuss increasing your involvement in family decisions in the future, as you express a desire to participate. More involved, as if I hadn't been attempting to be a part of things all along, as if belonging to my own family was some sort of reward he could dangle in front of me, if only I paid the price. I held my voice steady. So let me get this straight. You want me to rebook an $8,000 trip after you told me I wasn't invited, just so Vanessa doesn't get embarrassed. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second before snapping back into place. It's not about embarrassment. It's about family unity. You wouldn't want to be responsible for ruining Christmas, would you? I nearly laughed. Family unity. The phrase seemed absurd coming from him. But I kept quiet, allowing the silence to grow heavier. Dad despised silence. He was continually rushing to fill it. And sure enough, he began talking again. But this time his tone was harsher. If you refuse, Patrick, you are sending a clear message to your mother, sister, and everyone else that you do not care about them. And if that's the path you want to go. He hesitated, his eyes narrowing. Then don't expect us to be there for you when you need us. That was the betrayal, not the words. I had known deep down for years that they would never truly be there for me. It was the coldness behind them, the transactional manner he presented it. For him, family was not about love or fidelity. It was leverage. I swallowed hard and kept my emotions in check. So you're threatening to cut me off unless I pay for everything again? Dad leaned back and crossed his arms. Not a threat, just reality. You're old enough to understand how the world works. Nothing's free. That word shattered something in me. I recalled all the times I'd gone out of my way to aid them. The loans I provided after Dad's investments failed. I spent my weekends mending stuff around their house. Vanessa was lauded for doing the bare minimum, and I had showed unending patience. And here he was, staring me full in the eyes and insisting that none of it mattered unless I opened my wallet again. I'm not sure if he saw the change in my expression, but for the first time that night, I believe he recognized I wasn't going to cave. His phony charm crumbled slightly, and he whispered, "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Patrick." But the treachery wasn't over. 2 days later I received a call from my bank. This is a flagged transaction. Someone tried to exploit my account information to make a huge purchase. A reservation deposit for a chalet. And the name on the attempted booking was my father's. That was when the final thread of confidence snapped. When the bank informed me of the attempted booking, my initial emotion was not even anger. It was a strange hollow feeling, as if the floor had gone out from beneath me. I anticipated Dad would try to manipulate me, but I didn't expect him to go so far as to attempt fraud with my personal information. The bank representative politely explained that the transaction was reported because the billing name did not match the account holder. Otherwise, it could have gone through. I thanked them, hung up and sat staring at my phone, stunned. My own father had attempted to steal from me. There was no longer even a slender thread of familial loyalty binding us together. For him, this was about survival. If he couldn't dominate me with words, he'd use money. That night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed, rehashing everything. Vanessa posted about her chalet. Mom arrives with her casserole and guilt trips. Dad's arrogant expression at my apartment. And now this. The betrayal was complex and weighty, and for the first time in my life, I discovered something that horrified and liberated me. I did not have a family. Not really. The following few days were tough. Vanessa went into overdrive on social media, portraying me as the monster. She made a vague remark about selfish people who ruin everything. Of course, all her pals expressed their sorrow. A cousin even texted me personally, asking, "Did you really cancel Christmas?" With that, the story transformed. I wasn't just left out anymore. I was painted as the bad person, the reason the family was breaking apart. Mom texted me message after message imploring me to simply fix this. She said things like, "Your father is under so much stress," and, "Vanessa's heartbroken. You know how important this is to her." She never asked how I was doing. She never once acknowledged what they had done to me. At work, I found it difficult to concentrate. I'd be sitting at my desk, spreadsheets open, but my mind would go back to Dad's expression when he said, "Nothing's free." The words resonated like a curse, reminding me that in his world, love came at a cost. My performance slipped. I stayed late to avoid returning home and being alone in the silence. And loneliness struck me hard. Christmas lights were erected throughout the city. Couples walked hand in hand through adorned streets. Kids rubbed their faces to the toy store glass. Everywhere I looked, people were immersed in warmth, laughing, and unity. And me. I had a one-bedroom apartment and a stack of unanswered texts that reminded me how unwelcome I was. I'll admit, there was one night when I nearly broke. I sat with my phone in hand, my thumb lingering over the call Dad button, hoping that if I just apologized and gave in, I'd be able to reunite with my family. But then I remembered the bank call, the fake booking, and the hollow in my chest that felt different. Resolve. That was the turning point. I started tiny. I gathered all of the documents I possessed, including emails showing the chalet was booked in my name, the cancellation reimbursement, and the bank's highlighted fraud notification. I backed up Vanessa's posts, her texts demanding that I solve things, and Dad's frightening voicemail. For the first time, I stopped reacting emotionally and began viewing the issue as a chess game. Every move they made, I countered. I did not inform them what I was doing. On the surface, I remained calm. I stopped answering calls, ignored the guilt-ridden texts, and let them think I was pouting in shame. Meanwhile, I was building something stronger, something they wouldn't expect. But before I could put my plan into action, they managed to push me lower. One evening, approximately a week before Christmas, I arrived home to find an envelope nailed to my door. The letter was typed, cold, and formal. It was from Dad, albeit signed. In it, Dad stated that I would no longer be welcome at family events unless I learnt to respect their sacrifices for me. He stated that Vanessa deserved the chalet since she had demonstrated her loyalty, but I had just caused friction and disgrace. And the final line, I'll never forget it. Patrick, you're not needed in this family. Consider this a warning. I sat on the floor of my apartment, letter in hand, staring at the words until they became blurry. That was the bottom. The type of anguish that settles deep within your chest and refuses to move. But, even in that abyss, something within me altered again. The youngster who had always sought their praise had bent himself to fit their pattern. That boy was gone. What remained was quieter, crisper, and more intentional. I was not going to struggle for their affection anymore. I was going to make sure they knew how it felt to lose what they believed they controlled. And so, in the solitude of that vacant flat, I started to plot. Something inside me came into focus after receiving that letter. It seemed like I'd spent my entire life hoping for a nod of approval that would never come. I immediately realized I didn't need it anymore. Instead of crushing me, their words, "You are not needed in this family," provided me with an unusual sense of liberation. If I was not needed, I owed them nothing. And if I owed them nothing, I could finally begin life on my own terms. The first step was to cut off the lifelines that had been quietly draining. For years I'd been assisting in ways I never realized. When Vanessa overdrew her account, I surreptitiously transferred her money. When Dad's investments plummeted, I'd cover a few bills. I'd often chip in for minor expenses like food, gas, and utilities. It was a habit created out of remorse and a desire to establish my belonging. But not anymore. I shut everything down. I changed my internet banking passwords, deactivated Mom's emergency credit card, and even diverted my mail to prevent snooping. It was like turning off a series of leaking faucets that had been running for years. Then I turned inward at work. Instead of dragging my feet, I began arriving early, putting in effort, and volunteering for projects I used to avoid. I believe part of me needed to immerse myself in something useful. But another part of me realized that every hour I spent on myself was one step closer to being free of their shadow. My supervisor noticed within a few weeks. By the new year, I was sitting in a meeting and hearing the terms, promotion and salary increase. For the first time, I had a sense of momentum. My bank account has grown. I didn't spend my evenings going through their seductive texts. I removed them all. Instead, I started going to the gym after work, which I had put off for years. The weights, the perspiration, and the slow but steady progress. It all became a ritual. My body grew stronger, and my confidence improved. I wasn't the same person who sat on the floor clutching that letter anymore. The transformation spread to other aspects of my life. I reconnected with old pals that I had separated myself from since my family did not like them. Julian, a college buddy, had his own little marketing agency and invited me to help with some freelancing work. What began as a side project suddenly grew into a significant source of revenue. Julian even quipped, "Man, you've been hiding your skills for too long. If your family doesn't appreciate you, don't worry, other people will." Those words remained. For so long, I had judged my worth according to their norms. But outside of their bubble, I was regarded, respected, and even admired. And this is where the actual power shift started. Remember all the paperwork I had secretly gathered? The chalet receipts, Vanessa's posts, a bank fraud notice, and Dad's voicemail. I started fitting them together like puzzle pieces, not out of spite at first, but to assure myself that I wasn't crazy. The evidence was plainly there. They had attempted to delete, distort, and steal from me. And I had proof. The longer I looked at it, the clearer it got. If I desired retribution, it wouldn't be through ranting or emotional outbursts. It would require precision, patience, and allowing them to dig their own hole as I stood at the perimeter with the spotlight. Meanwhile, life outside their orbit only became brighter. Julian connected me to contacts who opened possibilities I had never imagined. New contracts, larger clientele, and more money than I'd ever made before. I moved into a larger apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows viewing the metropolitan skyline. Every night, I'd stand there, glass of wine in hand, gazing at the glittering lights on the horizon and thinking, this is mine. Not theirs. Mine. It was not about money or status. It was about finally creating something they couldn't touch, claim credit for, or take away, and each step forward stoked my fire, now one of determination rather than desperation. They were still sending messages, of course. Vanessa attempted the guilt trip. You're wrecking everything. Why are you doing this to us? Dad issued veiled threats about destroying bridges. Mom played the martyr, writing things like, I lie awake at night worried about you. But where those words used to wound, they now only scratched me. I did not even respond. Silence became my most effective weapon. Because deep inside, I knew something others did not. They had already released their grip on me. They would soon lose much more than that. But I wasn't about to rush it. I was going to let time and success do the work. Allow them to become comfortable in their illusions. Because when the time came to strike back, it would not only be satisfying, but also indisputable. And then one afternoon, I discovered something that altered everything, something that transformed all of my quiet planning into an obvious, direct path to vengeance. The opportunity arose on an ordinary Tuesday, the type of day where nothing stands out until something changes beneath the surface. I was in Julian's office, helping him prepare a presentation for a new client. While he took a call, I glanced through my inbox and saw a message from my aunt. The same one who had contacted me puzzled about the chalet weeks before. She differed from the rest of the family. Not flawless, but less cruel and more attentive. The subject line read, "Thought you should see this." A PDF was attached, containing a scanned copy of an email chain between my father and other extended family. My heart raced as I read. Dad had indicated that Vanessa would be covering Christmas expenses this year. She stood up as the responsible one, and Patrick has decided he cannot contribute. He's humiliated, therefore we shouldn't bring it up in front of him. My stomach twisted. Responsible one. Vanessa had not even contributed a penny. Dad was reworking the story to make me look like a failure. Worse, he was instilling the notion that I couldn't afford goods, that I was somehow beneath them. But as nauseous as it made me, the email was invaluable. It confirmed what I had believed all along. Their game wasn't simply about cutting me out. It was about eliminating me and rewriting the family story so that I was portrayed as weak, selfish, and disposable. And then something occurred to me. If they wanted to play with stories, I'd make sure the truth was loud, clear, and impossible to twist. The time was also great. My promotion had just been completed, tripling my pay. Julian's freelance contracts were booming. My savings account looked better than it ever had. For the first time, I was not simply surviving. I was in a position of strength. Financially secure, professionally respected, socially connected. All aspects of my life they couldn't touch. That night, I began sketching up what I dubbed the reveal. Step 1. Document everything. I created a folder on my laptop with labeled files, including images of Vanessa's social media posts gloating about her chalet, bank bills indicating the money came from me, the cancellation receipt, the fraud warning, and now Dad's email chain. Every lie they said left a paper trail, and I had it. Step 2. Allies. My aunt was already halfway there when she sent me the email. I initially approached her tentatively, just to test the waters over coffee. She acknowledged she had always felt my parents favored Vanessa unfairly, but had no idea how far it went. She told me that your father's pride is his vulnerability. Vanessa believes anything makes her appear nice. Her words remained like pins on a map. Weaknesses, trends, and areas to strike. Step 3. Position myself where they don't expect it. Instead of isolating myself, I resumed attending extended family gatherings, birthdays, informal meals, and anything other than my parents' place. At first, there were whispers, side glances, and awkwardness from those who weren't sure which version of the story to trust. But I remained calm, polite, and present. I did not defend myself. I did not bring up the chalet. I simply let them see me. Stable job, new apartment, healthier, happy. Slowly, uncertainty began to sneak in. People recognized Vanessa's boasting did not reflect the reality they saw in me. And all the while, I was building. Julian referred me to someone who worked in event planning, and it was via this link that I received the idea for the final part of my plan. If my parents intended to utilize family gatherings as a stage, I'd make sure the brightest spotlight was shining squarely on them when the time came. Because power isn't always about having the loudest voice or the strongest grasp. Sometimes it takes patience, silently stepping out of the shadows, stacking the evidence, aligning the pieces, and waiting until your opponents are so confident they've won that they don't notice the earth crumbling beneath them. By the time Christmas arrived, my parents believed they had succeeded. They spent the holidays sulking at home. No chalet, no trip. Yet they said it was my fault, that I had ruined everything. Vanessa made a show of sharing photos with pals at a ski resort she'd named for clout, claiming it was the chalet. To the outside world, they appeared unconcerned. But I knew the truth. And I knew what was coming. Because the following step wasn't only to defend myself. It was about turning the tables, proving to everyone that the son they discarded, erased, and attempted to steal from was not weak. He was the one holding the cards. And the potential to flip the board was closer than they thought. The setting for my vengeance appeared almost too neatly. My aunt called in late January to tell me that there would be a large family gathering to celebrate my grandparents' anniversary. There were more than just cousins and uncles this time. Everyone knew me since I was a child, including aunts, uncles, family friends, and some of Dad's business partners. In other words, the exact audience my parents enjoyed performing for. The moment I hung up, I knew it was time for the reveal. I spent the next week cleaning the evidence folder that I had prepared. Every receipt, screenshot, and voicemail was carefully organized into a presentation file that I could open on my laptop and project onto a screen as needed. But the beauty of my approach was that I didn't have to yell or accuse. I merely had to present the truth quietly and deliberately, allowing their own words to do the damage. The night of the anniversary, I entered the dinner hall wearing the suit I had purchased with my promotion bonus, crisp and tailored, with a modest message. I wasn't the helpless black sheep they'd portrayed me as. I shook hands, smiled, and took praises on how well I looked. My folks quickly spotted me. Dad stiffened, Mom's polite smile wavered, and Vanessa rolled her eyes, as if I had interrupted her event. I could sense their dissatisfaction simmering, which just drove me more. Dinner was served, wine poured, and speeches delivered. Then followed the informal discussions around the tables. I waited until Vanessa brought up the chalet, because she couldn't resist. She laughed loudly, telling a cousin, "It was such a disaster because Patrick bailed at the last minute. Honestly, Dad and I had to scramble to make Christmas decent, but you know, some people just can't handle responsibility." Her words were bait, and I took them. I laid down my drink calmly and replied, "That's interesting, Vanessa. Because from where I sit, it looked a little different." The table fell silent. Dad quickly interjected, his voice calm but strained. "Let's not air family drama here. Tonight's about your grandparents." It made me laugh. I agree. It's about family, which is why it might be nice for everyone to know the full story since you've already started it, Vanessa. I removed my laptop from my bag. I hadn't intended to make it theatrical, but sometimes the circumstance demands it. I asked my cousin to assist me switch inputs on a projector that had been set up for a slideshow of old images. Within seconds, my screen illuminated the wall, and I showed them. First, I received a chalet confirmation email with my name and money clearly displayed. Gasps were heard around the room. The cancellation notification with the reimbursement information was then returned to me. Vanessa's posts bragging about her chalet were followed by Dad's email chain alleging Vanessa had paid for everything. Finally, the bank issued a flagged fraud alert with his name on it. I did not raise my voice once, I did not accuse or dramatize, I simply stated, "This is what happened. I paid for the chalet, they told me I wasn't invited, and when I canceled it, they attempted to use my account information without my permission." The silence that followed was oppressive. You could hear forks clinking against plates. My parents' faces were pallid and frozen. Vanessa spewed something about me distorting things, but the proof was right there, incontrovertible. Then came the murmurs. My aunt shook her head as my uncle mumbled, "I knew something was off." Even one of Dad's business acquaintances leaned back and whispered, "Unbelievable." For once, I wasn't the outsider, I was not the one being sacked. Everyone in the room knew I was telling the truth. Dad attempted to salvage it. He rose up, glass in hand, and said, "Let's not overreact. It was a misunderstanding." But I stopped him off, remaining cool. A misunderstanding is forgetting to invite someone. This was deliberate, and I think everyone here deserves to know what family values mean to you. The word values hovered in the air like a blade. Mom eventually broke down, whispering, "Patrick, please stop." But it was too late. The damage was done. Their carefully designed facade had shattered in front of the very individuals they wished to impress. I didn't stay very long after that. I did not need to. As I left the dining hall, I could still hear the comments and inquiries directed at them. For the first time in my life, the weight was lifted off of me. It was on them. And the joy of walking out into the chilly night air with my head held high was unlike anything I had ever experienced. But the fallout was only beginning. The consequences were immediate. And for once, I did not have to move a finger. My phone was constantly buzzing the morning after the anniversary gathering. Not from my parents. They remained mute. But from cousins, uncles, and even family acquaintances who had been present. The messages had the same tone: disbelief, sympathy, and quiet confirmation. "I can't believe they treated you like that. You were correct to show everyone. You are invited to spend the holidays with us instead." Word spread immediately. My parents' reputation, which they guarded so carefully, was in shambles. Dad's colleagues who had attended the banquet stopped returning his calls. A business contact of his, who had overheard the entire chalet disaster, quit a collaboration over worries about ethics. For a man who lived by appearances, it was like seeing his empire disintegrate. Vanessa attempted damage management on social media by posting cryptic claims about poisonous siblings and jealousy, but no one bought it. Screenshots of her original gloating posts had already spread across the family. Every attempt she made to portray herself as a victim simply pushed her deeper. Friends that she had worked so hard to impress unfollowed her. Her small circle of admirers shrank suddenly. And Mom retreated totally. For years she was the peacemaker, smoothing over Dad's rants and Vanessa's entitlement. But after that night, no one was listening to her "let's just move on" comments. People interpreted her silence as complicity. I remained quiet. I didn't have to brag. I did not need to say anything. Silence, which I had once despised, had become my most effective weapon. Weeks passed and the distance increased. No more calls, guilt trips, or letters nailed to my door. It was as if they recognized they had no more leverage. And the best part? I didn't miss them. For the first time in my life, I felt light. I had a job, friends, and was becoming more independent. I had peace. Then, one afternoon in March, I saw my aunt again in a cafe. She informed me that Dad tried to throw a dinner to clear the air, but few people turned up. The family was no longer interested in playing along with his vision of reality. "You don't realize it yet," she explained, smiling. "But you won. Not just against them, but against the hold they had on you." That night, I went home, stood by my apartment's window, and looked out at the city lights. For years I'd begged to sit at their table, bent myself to suit their shape, and carried the weight of their approbation like a burden I couldn't bear. But I didn't need it anymore. I had created something stronger that they couldn't change or take away. Their chalet vacation had failed. Their reputation had crumbled. Their grip on me was gone. As I moved away from the glass, a smile pulled on my lips. Because in reality, they had not barred me from attending Christmas. I had denied them entry into my home. I filmed my brother hurting his girlfriend and got him jailed. My parents kicked me out, saying I betrayed family and ruined his future. My name is Eric and I'm 18. This happened 3 months ago, yet I'm still struggling with the aftermath. I need guidance on whether I did the right thing, because everyone says I ruined my family. My 21-year-old brother Liam has always been the center of attention in our family. He plays college baseball and has a partial scholarship at State University. My parents treat him as if he can do no wrong. Growing up, Liam would smash my belongings and bully me around, and my parents would always make excuses for him. They claimed he was simply being competitive, or that I was being overly sensitive. When I was 14, Liam threw a baseball at my head during practice in our backyard. I ended up with a concussion and missed a week of school. My parents told everyone I had fallen off my bike. They warned it would harm Liam's prospects of being scouted if people suspected he had rage issues. I quickly realized that remaining quiet was simpler than fighting them. Liam began dating Samantha, a 19-year-old female, approximately 2 years ago. She's quiet and always appeared frightened around him. At family dinners she seldom spoke and flinched if he moved too fast. My parents adored her because she never questioned what Liam did. They would make jokes about how well-trained she was and Liam's ability to pick them. The incident that changed everything occurred on a Tuesday afternoon in October. I arrived home early from my part-time work at the grocery shop because I had a splitting headache. I worked there after school to save money for community college, as my parents stated that they would only pay for Liam's education. I arrived into our house and heard shouting from upstairs. Liam screamed at someone, and I heard a girl weep. I walked upstairs to see what was going on. The door to Liam's room was slightly open, allowing me to look inside. Liam had Samantha pinned against a wall. His hand was wrapped around her throat, and her feet were barely on the ground. She tried to say something, but she could scarcely breathe. Her face was going red. Liam was complaining about how she embarrassed him at a party the night before by talking to other guys. I remained there for almost 10 seconds, trying to grasp what I saw. Then I pulled out my phone and began recording. I recorded for around 30 seconds before Liam heard me. Samantha gasped as she plummeted to the floor after being dropped. Liam noticed me holding my phone and ran for the door, but I was already running downstairs. I locked myself in the bathroom and quickly dialed 911. I told them everything I observed and that I had captured it on camera. The dispatcher kept me on the line until the cops came about 15 minutes later. Liam was detained in the afternoon. Samantha was transported to the hospital to be examined. My parents arrived home while the cops were still present, and they immediately began defending Liam. They informed the authorities that Samantha was emotional and Liam would never harm anyone. They offered that perhaps I misread what I saw. The cops confiscated my phone and copied the footage. Liam was charged with domestic assault and released on bail the next morning. My parents paid the $5,000 bail with little hesitation. The morning after Liam left, I awoke to discover all of my possessions in garbage bags on the front porch. My mother was standing there, arms crossed. She informed me that I had betrayed my family and damaged Liam's future. She told me I was no longer welcome at their place. My father came out and told him I was dead. They claimed Liam committed one mistake, and I chose to wreck his life instead of dealing with it privately. I tried to convey that what I observed was not a mistake, but an assault. Samantha, according to my mother, was most likely exaggerating what happened, and females like her were often trying to trap affluent guys. She stated I was ignorant and would understand as I got older. I had nowhere to go. I called my 18-year-old pal Tom, but his parents declined to become involved in family trouble. I spent the first night sleeping in my car in the parking lot of the grocery store where I worked. Samantha called me the next day. She had obtained my phone number from Liam's before the police confiscated it. She was residing with her older sister, Maria, 25 female, and wanted to thank me for calling the police. She claimed Liam's condition had deteriorated over the last few months, but she was too terrified to inform anyone. Maria met me up at the parking lot and drove me to their apartment. She works as a paralegal and is familiar with legal issues. She stated I did the right thing and possibly saved Samantha's life. Maria allowed me to sleep on their couch. Samantha showed me texts Liam had sent her after his release on bail. He threatened to post private images of her online if she did not withdraw the allegations. He promised to make sure everyone at school understood what kind of person she truly was. The messages worsened with each passing day. Maria copied all of the messages and told us we needed to give them to the police. She also stated that the video I captured would be essential proof. Samantha had previously been too afraid to speak out about Liam's actions, although she did admit to prior instances in which he became physically aggressive with her. My parents called me thousands of times, but I did not answer. Finally, my father left a voicemail stating that they would give me one chance to return home if I accepted my mistake and deleted the video. He claimed they'd forgive me if I helped to resolve this matter. The voicemail sounded like something my mother had written. I never reacted to the voicemail or any of their subsequent attempts to reach me. Maria assisted me in changing my phone number after Liam began sending me threatening messages too. He told me I had no idea what I was getting into and that I would regret turning against my family. The legal process progressed slowly. Liam hired an expensive lawyer who repeatedly tried to have the charges reduced. The prosecutor was preparing a case and wanted to interrogate me again about what I had witnessed. Samantha was debating whether to testify because Liam's lawyer made it appear that she had invited the assault. I had to drop out of high school for a few weeks because I didn't have anywhere stable to reside and couldn't complete my studies. The school counselor called my parents to check on me, but they informed her I had moved out of choice and was acting dramatically. They didn't say that I was kicked out. Maria's flat was small, and I knew I couldn't stay there indefinitely. Samantha was having nightmares and panic attacks, and my presence was a continual reminder of what had transpired. I began looking into other choices, but I had no money saved and no family support. I petitioned for emancipation through the legal system so that I might receive help for homeless youth. The process was difficult, and I needed to establish that my parents had abandoned me. I gave copies of the voicemail and text messages in which they disowned me. Liam violated the restraining order 3 weeks after his initial arrest by showing up to Samantha's job. He waited in the parking lot until she finished her shift at the restaurant, where she works part-time. A co-worker witnessed him grab Samantha's arm and attempt to pull her into his car. Liam was apprehended once more. This time his bail was cancelled, and he was forced to remain in jail until trial. My parents spent their savings account in an attempt to get him out, but the judge refused. They also blamed me for this, claiming that if I hadn't documented the original incident, none of this would have occurred. The prosecutor phoned me and stated that Liam's case had become significantly stronger as a result of the bail violation. They wanted me to testify about what I saw in the initial assault. I volunteered to testify because I knew Samantha needed someone to verify her account. My parents hired a private investigator to follow me around and record where I was staying. They were attempting to claim I was living in unstable conditions so that they could use it against me in court. The PI photographed me on my way to Maria's apartment and then to work. I haven't spoken to my parents or Liam since the day I was kicked out. My younger sister, Emma, 16 female, attempted to contact me once through a friend, but when I phoned her back, she cried and hung up. I later discovered that my parents had told her that I was a traitor who preferred strangers above family. The hardest part was recognizing that my parents would never back me if it meant going up against Liam. They taught me throughout my youth that family loyalty entailed always looking out for one another. However, when I asked them to choose between right and wrong, they selected Liam without hesitation. I'm currently enrolled in a temporary housing program for young adults. It isn't ideal, but it's secure and reliable. I'm working on earning my GED after missing so much school. Samantha and Maria have become like family to me, which is surprising given how little I knew them before all of this happened. The trial is scheduled to begin next month. The prosecutor claims they have a solid case due to the video evidence and bail breach. Samantha has opted to testify, and numerous other females have come forward with accounts of Liam's actions. Apparently this was not his first violent encounter with a lover. I know I did the right thing by calling the police, but I had no idea it would cost me my entire family. My parents claim I ruined their lives, but I simply reported a crime I witnessed. I kept wondering whether there was another way to handle it without tearing everything apart. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't arrived home early that day, or if I had simply ignored what I saw. Liam would still be free, and I would still have a family, but Samantha would be dead, and that is something I cannot accept. I'm posting this because I want to know from strangers if what I accomplished was worthwhile. Everyone in my life now agrees that I did the right thing, but they did not lose their family as a result. My parents have made it clear that I will never be welcomed back, and at the age of 18, I'm attempting to find out how to start a new life. Update 1. Liam was found guilty of all charges at the conclusion of his trial last week. He was sentenced to 18 months in jail and 3 years probation. The judge stated that video footage was critical in demonstrating the assault beyond reasonable doubt. Samantha testified for 2 days and did well, despite Liam's lawyer's attempts to make her appear to be lying. But that's not the most important news. Something came out throughout the trial that I had no idea about. During the prosecution's case, they called an unexpected witness. My cousin Ryan, 23, who is my father's nephew and lives approximately an hour distant from us. I always assumed he didn't enjoy seeing our family because he rarely came around on holidays. Ryan said that while he was in high school, he attempted to inform my parents that Liam had attacked him at a family cookout. This happened when I was about 12, so I don't recall it well. Ryan claimed Liam struck him in the stomach after losing a card game, then threatened to injure him far more if he told anybody else. When Ryan told his parents what had transpired, they faced my mother and father. My parents disputed it, claiming Ryan was lying because he was jealous of Liam's athletic accomplishments. They barred Ryan from family gatherings and informed the entire extended family that he was fabricating stories to get Liam in trouble. Ryan's testimony clarified why Liam appeared to believe he could get away with violence. My parents have been covering for him and disregarding his victims for many years. They established a pattern in which Liam learnt that his acts would have no consequences as long as they controlled the story. The prosecutor also produced evidence that my parents had paid Liam's lawyer with money from my education fund. I had been saving birthday and Christmas money in that account since I was a child, and they closed it without telling me. When I found out, I wasn't surprised, but it reaffirmed that they had never intended to sponsor my schooling. Following the sentencing, my father met me outside the courthouse. He appeared to have aged 10 years in the last few months. He said the family had been destroyed and asked if I was satisfied with my achievements. He claimed Liam's life had been damaged and that I would be burdened with that obligation indefinitely. I informed him that Liam had damaged his own life by assaulting Samantha and violating his bond. My father told me that I was too young to comprehend how the real world operated, and that we should have handled this quietly. He left without saying goodbye. My mother did not speak to me during the trial, but she scowled at me every time I entered the courtroom. On the day of sentence, she delivered a victim impact statement in which she expressed how much anguish this had caused their family. She said I had been duped by outside forces, and that the true victim was Liam, who was simply attempting to punish his girlfriend. When my mother finished speaking, the judge appeared disgusted. He stated that domestic abuse was never acceptable and that the court had received sufficient information to establish that this was not an isolated incident. 3 days after the sentence, my sister Emma reached me via a friend's social media account. She asked to meet me at a coffee shop near our high school. I was afraid to visit her because I hadn't spoken to a single family member since the day they kicked me out. Emma appeared fatigued when I saw her. She'd lost weight and developed black circles beneath her eyes. She claimed living at home had become terrible after Liam's incarceration. My parents are continuously fighting and blaming each other for how they handled the problem. Every night, my mother drinks alcohol and laments about how her boys abandoned her. My father works additional hours to avoid being at home. Emma claimed she knew I was correct to contact the cops since she had witnessed Liam hurt Samantha before. Liam grabbed Samantha's wrist so forcefully at a family dinner last year that she ended up with bruises when she reached for something without asking him. Emma noticed the marks later, while Samantha was working in the kitchen, but Samantha begged her not to say anything. Emma also informed me that Liam had been abusive with her. Nothing as bad as what he did to Samantha, but he would twist her arm or push her while my parents weren't watching. He always threatened her thereafter, claiming that no one would believe her if she complained. Emma stated that she was terrified of him but did not know how to tell anyone. Emma found the chat tough since she was divided between loyalty to our parents and knowing I had done the right thing. She claimed that my parents had barred her from contacting me and that she would be in trouble if they found out about our meeting. She also claimed that they had informed all of our relatives that I was doing drugs and had mental health issues, which is why I had turned against the family. Emma gave me some of my possessions that my parents had retained after they kicked me out. She had concealed them in her chamber before our parents could dispose of them. There were some photographs, books, and a watch that my grandfather had given me before his death. Seeing such things made me understand how much my parents had tried to exclude me from their lives. Emma mentioned before she left that she was counting down the days until she could graduate and leave home. She stated living with our parents alone was suffocating, and they watched everything she did because they were afraid of losing another kid. She wasn't permitted to invite people over or travel away without a lengthy explanation of where she would be. After meeting Emma, I recognized that my parents' concept of family devotion was a kind of control and cruelty. They had taught all of us to remain silent about Liam's actions. When I finally broke the quiet, they interpreted it as the ultimate betrayal. Samantha also told me that more girls from Liam's high school and college contacted the prosecutor after hearing about the trial. Liam had a reputation for being harsh with girlfriends, but no one had ever reported him because his family was well known in the neighborhood. The prosecution informed me that if I hadn't documented the assault and alerted the cops, Liam would have likely progressed to more severe violence. Samantha stated she had planned to end her relationship with him the week after I witnessed the assault, and she believes he would have hurt her seriously if she had tried to leave. I'm still living in transitional housing and studying for my GED. The program I'm in assists young adults who have been booted out or abandoned by their parents. I've met other people with similar situations, which has helped me realize that my position is not unique. Maria assisted me in applying for college financial aid as an independent student, as my parents are plainly not going to fund my education. The procedure is difficult, but if all goes well, I should be able to join community college next September. Samantha is feeling better now that Liam is in jail. She began counseling through a victim services program and is considering transferring to another school next year to seek a fresh start. She and Maria both stated I could contact them once I moved out of temporary housing. The strangest aspect of this is that I feel more stable today than I did when I lived with my parents. Even though I lost my family and had to start over from scratch, I don't have to tiptoe on eggshells or pretend Liam's behavior was typical. I do not have to cover up abuse or justify violence. My parents chose to protect Liam above his victims. I made my decision when I realized that doing the right thing was more essential than keeping my family together. Despite the fact that I lost everything I thought I knew about my family, I still believe I made the correct decision. Update 2. Liam was released from jail 2 weeks ago on work release, which means he can work during the day, but must return to spend the remainder of his term at night. His probation officer contacted me to inform me of his release date and to see if I felt comfortable. I told them I wasn't concerned because Liam had shown no interest in contacting me after the trial. I was mistaken about that. Liam showed up last Tuesday at the grocery shop where I work. I was stocking shelves in the produce section when I noticed him stroll in about 3 p.m. He was dressed for the construction job he had gotten as part of his release program. I immediately proceeded to see my manager and informed him of the restraining order. My manager contacted the cops, but Liam reached me before they came. He stood around 10 feet away, which was theoretically outside the restraining order distance, and began talking. He said he needed to tell me something vital concerning our parents that concerned Emma's safety. Liam claimed our parents had lied to everyone about why they kicked me out. According to him, they informed relatives and family acquaintances that I had stolen money from them and that I was doing drugs. They claimed they tried to help me but had to remove me from the house to protect Emma from my negative influence. He also claimed that our father had been drinking heavily since the trial and had gone into debt attempting to pay legal bills. Our mother was working 2 jobs to pay the mortgage, and they were thinking about selling the home. Liam stated that they blamed me for damaging the family's reputation in the neighborhood. The police arrived as Liam was speaking. They examined his work release documents and established that he was supposed to be at his working site, not my workplace. The officer informed Liam that his presence violated the terms of his release and that he must leave immediately. Liam mentioned something else before the police escorted him out that I'm still thinking about. He claimed Emma had been questioning our parents about what truly happened with Samantha and the assault. According to Liam, Emma had been defending me and expressing her want to contact me again. Our parents had threatened to send her to live with our aunt in another state if she continued to bring up my name. After Liam left, I called Maria to tell her what had happened. She advised me to report the contact to both the police and Liam's probation officer, as showing up at my workplace may be deemed harassment. She also urged that I find a method to contact Emma and make sure she was okay. The following day, Liam's probation officer called to inform me that his work release had been terminated due to the incident at my job. Liam was back in jail, serving the balance of his sentence. According to the officer, Liam stated he was delivering an important family message, but any communication with me was prohibited for any reason. 2 days later, Emma called me. She was using a friend's phone because her parents had confiscated her cell phone as punishment for something. She sounded worried and stated that she needed to see me straight away. We decided to meet at the same coffee shop where we had met previously. Emma appeared worse than the previous time I saw her. Her long sleeves helped to conceal a bruise on her upper arm. When I asked her about it, she explained that our father had grabbed her during an argument about me. She stated that the atmosphere at home had deteriorated significantly since Liam returned to jail. Emma informed me that our parents had been asking her about whether she had been in contact with me. They accused her of sneaking around and deceiving them. When she admitted to seeing me once, our father lost his cool and grabbed her arm, ranting about family devotion and betrayal. Our mother had supported our father's actions by stating that Emma needed to understand that her decisions had repercussions. Emma claimed they were treating her like she was a potential traitor who needed to be continuously monitored. They had also canceled her intentions to attend a summer program at a community college because they did not trust her to be away from them. The worst part was what Emma told me about the night Liam broke his bond and attempted to grab Samantha in the parking lot. Emma explained that our parents knew Liam was going to approach Samantha since he called them from jail for advice. They instructed him to try to reason with her and persuade her to dismiss the charges. Emma overheard our mother tell our father that if Liam could just talk to Samantha quietly, he would be able to straighten things out. They knew he wasn't supposed to contact her, but they assumed the restraining order was a formality that could be bypassed if Liam was careful. This meant that our parents had practically encouraged Liam to breach his bail conditions, resulting in him being detained again and losing his chance to remain out of jail during the trial. They destroyed his own legal case because they refused to acknowledge that he had to follow the rules. Emma also informed me that our parents had been contacting Samantha's family, attempting to persuade them to pressure Samantha into revising her testimony. They left voicemails for Samantha's mother, stating that the trial was hurting 2 families and that Samantha should consider the wider picture. Samantha's family had to change their phone number to avoid harassment. After hearing all of this, I concluded that my parents would never cease attempting to control the situation. Even after Liam was convicted and jailed, they continued to try to control the narrative and blame others for the repercussions of his conduct. I told Emma that she needs to document the bruise on her arm and any other instances where our parents got physical with her. I also gave her my new phone number and told her she may call me if she felt unsafe. Emma expressed concern that contacting me might exacerbate the situation at home, but she also stated that she couldn't continue to pretend that our parents were wonderful people. Emma asked whether I thought she should report what our father had done to her arm. I told her that was her decision, but she deserved to feel comfortable in her own house. I also told her that what our father did was unacceptable, even if our parents attempted to rationalize it as discipline. Emma handed me a letter that had been mailed to our house and was addressed to me. It came from our grandmother on our mother's side. She lives in Florida and rarely communicates with our family, but she had seen information about Liam's trial online. In the letter, she stated that she was proud of me for doing the right thing, but that she had never trusted Liam because he reminded her of our grandfather, who had abused our grandmother when our mother was younger. Our grandmother's letter revealed a lot about why our mother was so determined to safeguard Liam. Apparently, our mother grew up hearing our grandma justify our grandfather's aggressive behavior. Our mother had learned that keeping the family together was more essential than dealing with abuse, and she was following the same pattern with Liam. The letter included a $500 check and our grandmother's phone number. She wrote that she hoped she could help me more, but her health prevented her from traveling. She explained that our mother had always chosen to protect the wrong people, and that she was sorry I had to pay the price for telling the truth. Reading our grandmother's letter made me realize that my family's difficulties extended deeper than Liam's actions. Our parents had been formed by their own experiences with abuse and cover-ups, and they had never learned healthier dispute resolution strategies. I'm still in transitional housing, but I'll be moving into my own apartment next month as part of a program for young adults aging out of the system. I'll be starting community college in the fall and working part-time to help support myself. It's not the life I had envisioned when I lived with my parents, but it's one I created by making my own decisions rather than following their instructions. Samantha is doing well and has decided to attend a school in another state for her senior year. She wants to leave the village, where everyone knows about the trial. Maria was promoted at her law company and has been assisting other victims of domestic violence navigate the judicial system. I had not heard personally from my parents since the day my father confronted me outside the courts. According to Emma, they still talk about me as if I were dead. They've informed folks that they only have 2 children and know no one named Eric. Final update: Emma fled her home 3 weeks ago. She's residing with our grandmother in Florida since our parents passed a limit that Emma couldn't ignore. It all began when Emma's high school guidance counselor called our parents to discuss Emma's college applications. Emma was worried and distant, and her grades were falling. During the appointment, the counselor asked Emma discreetly if everything was all right at home. Emma broke down and told the counselor about the injuries, the constant monitoring, and the threats of being kicked out if she uttered my name. The counselor was compelled to report any suspected abuse, so she phoned Child Protective Services. When CPS arrived to our home 2 days later, our parents were enraged. They accused Emma of lying and fabricating stories to gain attention. Our father claimed that Emma had been influenced by me and was attempting to destroy the family in the same way that I had done. Our mother explained that Emma was being dramatic and that typical family correction was not abuse. The CPS agent examined Emma at school and documented the fading mark on her arm. Emma also showed them text conversations in which our mother threatened to send her to boarding school if she continued to raise questions about me. The worker informed Emma that she had options if she did not feel comfortable at home. That night, our parents confronted Emma about speaking to CPS. According to Emma, our father screamed at her for hours about family devotion and how she, like me, had betrayed them. Our mother claimed they had given up everything for their children and that Emma was being ungrateful and selfish. The argument heated up when Emma stated that she wanted to contact me and that she did not believe I had done anything wrong. Our father grabbed Emma by the shoulders and shook her, saying that I was dead to the family and that she should forget I existed. Emma threatened to call CPS again, and our father told her she could pack her bags and leave if she didn't like how they managed their home. Emma called our grandmother at night. Our grandma promptly purchased Emma's plane ticket to Florida and instructed her to depart the house the following morning when our parents were at work. Emma packed one suitcase and wrote a note stating that she would live with our grandmother until she was 18. When our parents found the note, they called our grandma and requested that she return Emma. Our grandma informed them that Emma was welcome to stay for as long as she wanted and that she had seen enough of their parenting techniques. She stated that if they tried to compel Emma to return, she would hire a lawyer to assist Emma become legally emancipated. Our parents drove to Florida the following weekend to persuade Emma to return home. Emma declined to see them. Our grandmother informed them that Emma was terrified of them and that they had lost the right to call themselves her parents since they chose to protect Liam over their children. Emma contacted me from our grandmother's place and told me all of this. She sounded different than the previous time we spoke, less terrified and more determined. She stated, "Living with our grandmother was like stepping into a different world where people didn't have to walk on eggshells or make excuses for abuse." Emma informed me that our grandmother had been estranged from our mother for years due to disagreements over how our mother handled Liam's behavior. Our grandmother had recognized the warning signs early on and tried to persuade our parents to seek professional help for Liam, but they dismissed her concerns as interference. When Liam was in high school, our grandmother volunteered to help pay for family counseling, but our parents declined because they believed there was nothing wrong with her family that others could comprehend. Our grandmother recognized then that our parents would support Liam no matter what he did. Emma stated that our grandmother apologized for not doing enough to help us when we were younger. She had attempted to establish a relationship with our mother but eventually gave up because our parents refused to recognize that Liam was a problem. Our grandma regretted not being more present in our lives. 3 days after our parents' unsuccessful vacation to Florida, I received a call from our mother. It was the first time she had contacted me directly since the day I was kicked out. She sounded tired and desperate. She stated the family was falling apart and begged if I would come home to assist, persuade Emma to return. Our mother stated that she and our father acknowledged they had made mistakes in how they handled things. She claimed they were eager to talk about Liam and recognize he had problems. She promised that things would change if I returned and that we could work together to repair the family. I informed our mother that I was not interested in returning and that Emma had made her own decision about where she wanted to live. I told them that if parents wanted to re-establish ties with their children, they needed to start by accepting responsibility for their actions rather than expecting us to address the problems they had caused. Our mother burst into tears, saying she couldn't understand how everything had gone wrong. She stated that all she had ever wanted was to keep the family together and protect her children. I informed her that shielding one child while allowing him to harm others was killing the family from within. The conversation ended when our mother stated that she couldn't accept Liam as the villain in this case. She insisted that there had to be another explanation that did not portray her and our father as horrible parents. I recognized at that point that she was still unwilling to face the reality about Liam's actions, or their role in covering it up. Emma and I communicate on the phone every few days. She is starting her final year of high school in Florida and has been admitted to numerous institutions. Our granny is helping her apply for financial aid and scholarships. Emma stated that she feels like she can breathe again and wishes she had left sooner. Liam is set to be freed from jail next month and serve the remainder of his term on probation. His probation officer phoned me and asked whether I wanted to be advised of his release date and location. I stated that I was not concerned about Liam, but I did want to know if he violated his probation again. Samantha graduated from college last month and was accepted into graduate school in another state. She's leaving this summer to start over somewhere Liam and my family cannot find her. She claimed that the trial and everything that followed taught her that she was stronger than she realized and that she deserved better than Liam was providing her. I moved to my own apartment 6 weeks ago. It's little and the neighborhood isn't particularly appealing, but it's mine, and no one can kick me out for doing the right thing. I work full-time at a warehouse and attend school part-time at a community college. My plan is to transfer to a 4-year institution next year and study social work. The most shocking aspect of starting a life away from my family is how tranquil it is. I don't have to be concerned about Liam's moods or my parents' justifications. I don't have to help cover up abuse or pretend that violence is acceptable. I can make judgments based on what I believe are right rather than what keeps the family together. My parents have made it obvious that they regard both Emma and myself as traitors who abandoned the family. They've told relatives that they created ungrateful children who turned on them when they needed it the most. They refuse to admit that their choices had caused the predicament. Some people believe I should try to reconcile with my parents, or give them another chance to make things right. However, I've discovered that some people are so determined to their interpretation of reality that they refuse to change, even if it means losing their children. My parents selected Liam over the rest of the family, and they continue to do so. Emma and I are developing a bond with our grandma, which our parents sought to prevent. We are learning about aspects of our family history that our parents have kept concealed. We are also learning that family connections can be built on respect and honesty rather than fear and control. I still wonder what would have happened if I hadn't called the cops that day. Liam would likely still be free to harm Samantha and other women. Emma would probably still be stuck in that house, afraid to speak out against mistreatment. I might still be part of a system that protects perpetrators while silencing victims. I lost the family I thought I had when I called the cops on Liam, but it helped me find the family I really wanted. Emma is safe now. Samantha is creating a new life, and I'm learning to trust my own instincts rather than following someone else's rules about devotion and silence. I have no regrets about the decision I took. I would make the same decision again if I had to. Because some things are more essential than keeping a dysfunctional family intact. Doing the right thing sometimes entails admitting that you will have to start over, but that new life can be better than the one you abandoned. Now, let us go to the following narrative. Story 2. My cousin's daughter pretended to be in need of housing assistance in order to gain access to my son, then attempted to take his inheritance and my business. Now, my entire family thinks I'm wrong for filing accusations. I, 45, have been raising my 20-year-old son Richard by myself since my spouse died in a car accident 15 years ago. We've lived a quite average existence. I own a bakery that my husband and I established when we were 25, and Richard has grown up working there. The bakery is nothing special, just a modest store in a shopping mall, but it does well enough to support us and save some money for Richard's education. My husband left us some life insurance money, which I put in Richard's future. We've never been affluent, but we've always been comfortable. Richard is a good child. He studies hard and works at the bakery on weekends, and we've always been close. After his father died, we began the custom of Sunday movie nights. Richard would make time for such movie nights, even as he approached his adolescence. My Aunt Helen was a great assistance after my husband died. Helen is my mother's younger sister, and because my mother resides in another state, she has served as Richard's grandma figure. She would watch him after school when I had to work late at the bakery, and she even gave me a loan once when our oven broke down and needed to be replaced. Monica, her 25-year-old daughter, was 10 when I first started babysitting her on occasion. Helen was also a single mom, so we helped each other out over the years. Monica was always a little different from other youngsters. She was extremely intelligent, but also manipulative. I recall when she was 12, she persuaded one of her classmates to exchange her new bike for Monica's old video game console. The girl's parents were furious when they found out, but Monica had gotten the girl to write a note claiming it was a fair trade, so they couldn't do much about it. Helen often shrugged it off, claiming Monica was simply clever with people. We didn't see much of Monica as a teenager. She went to college in another state and only attended family gatherings on occasion. She last spent any substantial time with us during Helen's 60th birthday party 5 years ago. Richard was 15 at the time, and Monica, who was 20, spent a lot of time with him discussing college and his future plans. I thought it was good that she was showing interest in her younger relative. Monica called 3 months ago to tell me she had acquired a marketing position with a firm in our city. She needed a place to stay while looking for an apartment, and as we had a spare room, I invited her to stay with us. I believed it was a way to repay Helen's generosity throughout the years. The first month was excellent. Monica helped around the house, expressed interest in the bakery, and would frequently stay late to assist me with paperwork and inventory. She explained that her profession allowed her to work flexible hours, so she would sometimes be home throughout the day. I did not question it because many organizations now have remote work practices. In retrospect, there were warning indications. Monica was always present whenever Richard was home. If he was studying in the living room, she would also work there. If he was at the bakery assisting me, she would arrive with coffee or snacks. She began volunteering to assist him study for his business classes, claiming that her marketing knowledge would be beneficial. Richard began acting differently approximately 2 months after Monica moved in. He started keeping his phone face down and leaving the room to text. He skipped 2 consecutive Sunday movie nights, citing a lack of time due to studies. That was not like him at all. Even during finals week, he'd make time for movie nights. Everything came out last week when Richard texted me a recipe that needed checking. I checked his messages and saw dozens of texts between him and Monica. They had been covertly dating for nearly 2 months. The messages indicate that Monica had planned the entire incident. She hadn't only moved here for a job. She had relocated here solely to pursue Richard. She'd been watching all of his social media sites for months before approaching me about living with us. The marketing job was all made up. She'd stopped her regular work and was living on savings while attempting to get closer to Richard. She instructed him not to inform me about their relationship because she thought I was overprotective and would react badly if I found out. When I confronted Monica, she made no attempt to refute anything. She claimed she formed feelings for Richard at Helen's birthday party 5 years ago. She had been waiting for him to be old enough so that it would not appear indecent. She said there was nothing wrong with what she did because they were both adults now. The way she mentioned waiting for Richard to be old enough disturbed me. She'd practically been watching him grow up, intending to date him the entire time. She utilized my gratitude to Helen and our familial connection to get close to him. The entire situation felt intentional and wrong. Richard was perplexed when I showed him how long Monica had been planning this. She had convinced him that their relationship had grown organically as a result of their time together. He had no idea she had been stalking him online or that she had moved here just for him. He felt keeping their connection private was only temporary until they worked out how to tell me without making things awkward. I told Monica that she needed to leave my house. That's when she became angry and revealed her true personality. She claimed she had acquired residency, and I could not legally evict her without appropriate notice. She threatened to inform Helen that I was sending her out on the street after everything Helen had done for us. She also indicated that I was jealous because Richard was focused on someone else rather than me. I issued her a written 30-day notice to quit, but by then she had already called Helen. Now, my entire family is involved. Helen calls me every day, weeping about how I am being unkind to her daughter. She claims Monica has always struggled to connect with people her own age, but she has now found someone who understands her. She constantly bringing up how she supported us when my husband died, suggesting I owe her family more consideration. Other relatives have also taken sides. My cousin Mark believes I'm overreacting because Richard and Monica aren't blood related. My sister believes I'm being overprotective about the age gap. My uncle Bill says I should be delighted Richard found someone from our family rather than a stranger. Richard is receiving letters from family members encouraging him to stand up for himself and his relationship with Sarah. Some of them bring up Helen's role in raising him, implying that we both owe her family more allegiance. Some relatives even said that my reaction indicates that I have pathological attachment issues with Richard and should let him grow up. I will not back down on this. Monica tricked her way into our home and attempted to surreptitiously date my son. She lied about having a job, about why she relocated here, and even encouraged Richard to lie to me. That is not the type of person I want him to be engaged with, regardless of family connections. Update 1. Things have become significantly worse since my last update. Monica moved out yesterday, but the last 2 weeks have been dreadful. She began telling family people that she and Richard had been sleeping together since she moved in, saying that I was attempting to separate them because I couldn't tolerate Richard having another woman in his life. When Helen reiterated these accusations to me, Richard became enraged and showed me all of their communications to verify that nothing physical had ever occurred. Their connection had primarily consisted of messaging and a few discreet rendezvous for coffee or lunch. The communications showed Monica consistently pressing for more, while Richard was hesitant to go too quickly and hide secrets from me. After Monica moved out, I discovered proof that made everything much more serious. I discovered a notebook in the guest room that included extensive financial information. She had jotted down our bank account numbers, information on the bakery's earnings, and, most worrying, exact facts regarding Richard's inheritance from his father. When she stayed late to help with paperwork, the bakery's surveillance camera captured her looking through my office files. She had been photographing documents and logging into our computer system with my password, which she had apparently remembered while watching me work. She had copied information on our suppliers, costs, and daily sales numbers. I also discovered a spreadsheet on the laptop she forgot to take with her when she moved out. It had a planned plan to persuade Richard to use his inheritance money to build a competitive bakery. She had researched nearby locations, calculated startup costs using information from my suppliers, and even created company financing applications based on our financial data. When I investigated her laptop's internet history, I discovered she had been investigating how inheritance money is handled in marriages and dividing assets after divorce. She had also looked into moving business ownership among family members and forced buyouts of family enterprises. Looking through Richard's phone indicated that she had been working on his psychology. She would casually imply that his business lessons had made him more competent to run a bakery than me. She remarked that working for his mother indefinitely was not ambitious enough for someone with his talent. She had been attempting to divide us by making comments about how I was using the bakery to exert control over his life. When I told Helen what we had discovered, she continued to defend Monica. She said that Monica was simply being thorough in planning a future with Richard, and that inquiring into family money was fair if they were getting married. She accused me of invading Monica's privacy by peeking at her laptop, and she said that I was painting Monica as a criminal in order to prevent Richard from becoming independent. The family is currently divided into 3 parts. Some people are appalled by Monica's conduct and have apologized for doubting me. Others believe I'm exaggerating things to damage Monica's reputation because I don't want Richard to grow up. Several people, including Helen, continue to defend Monica and claim she did nothing wrong. My sister, who first backed Monica, now recognizes that the situation appears predatory, but believes I should handle it quietly to prevent harming Monica's reputation. She claims Monica is young and has made errors, but she does not deserve to have her life ruined because of this. She continues bringing up how this could influence Helen's status within the family. Update 2. The matter has escalated beyond ordinary family drama. Richard received a call yesterday from our bank regarding a business loan application completed in his name. Monica had forged his signature on loan applications using the personal information she had obtained while living with us. She made a false email address purporting to be Richard and had been communicating with the bank about the loan for weeks. We filed a police report, which revealed much more truth. This wasn't Monica's first effort at fraud. At her prior job, she was fired for attempting to open credit cards using her co-workers' personal information. Her prior employer agreed not to press charges as long as she went quietly, so we never found out about it. According to the police investigation, Monica owed approximately $50,000 in gaming debt to online casinos. She'd maxed up 6 credit cards and gotten loans from several family members. She informed my Aunt Carol that she needed $10,000 for emergency cancer treatment. She persuaded my cousin Pete to lend her $15,000 for a fraudulent IT startup. The worst thing was that she had persuaded Helen to take out a second mortgage on her home, claiming she was being blackmailed for certain images. Monica, according to the detective, constructed a bogus internet account years ago in order to learn about Richard's hobbies. She utilized this information to pretend they shared everything. She had researched his social media posts regarding movies, music, and books, and then casually brought up these same topics when speaking with him. She had even begun watching all of his favorite shows so that she could debate them with him. She took meticulous notes on his schedule, friends, and activities. She knew about his college coursework, his work schedule at the bakery, and even notes from talks he had with others. She had effectively been following him for years, waiting for the proper moment to make her move. When the cops questioned Monica, she finally broke down and admitted everything. She revealed that she had been preparing this since she saw Richard at Helen's birthday party. Her strategy was to obtain his inherited money through marriage, then persuade him to invest it in a new business that she would actually manage. She reasoned that even if they split, she would own half the company. Helen had to confront the truth when the bank approached her about her late house payments. Monica had been pocketing the mortgage proceeds rather than paying the bank. Helen investigated her accounts and discovered that Monica had been stealing from her for years, taking little amounts that Helen had overlooked. She took nearly $30,000 from her mother. Update 3. Monica accepted a plea agreement to avoid jail time. She is on probation for 3 years and has to repay everyone she stole from. She moved back in with Helen, who had to sell her home to pay off her second mortgage. They relocated to a small apartment in another city, primarily because Helen was unable to face her family after what had transpired. Richard transferred to a business school in another state. He still intends to take over the bakery someday, but he needed a break from all the family drama. He told me he felt stupid for not seeing through Monica's deception, but I kept assuring him she duped everyone, not just him. She'd been practicing this maneuver for years. Most of our family have apologized for questioning me, but I'm keeping my distance from everyone except those who have always backed us. Helen occasionally sends messages about missing our friendship, but I can't get over how swiftly she turned on me. My sister says I should forgive Helen because she also lost everything, but I don't think that excuses the way she treated us. I made many adjustments in the bakery. All of our accounts have been moved to a new bank, and I've installed stronger security cameras. I now have a lawyer who handles all of our business paperwork. Richard and I rarely attend family gatherings anymore. When we go, we keep our conversations short and avoid discussing Monica or what occurred. Some relatives believe I am being too hard on the family by remaining away. But this experience taught me who I can truly trust. Monica didn't simply attempt to take money, she attempted to damage my relationship with my son and turn my entire family against me. Some things you simply cannot forgive, even if it means losing connections that have lasted decades. The bakery is performing better than ever. Richard calls me every Sunday for our movie night. Now we're watching the same movie while video chatting. It is different than previously, but we are making it work. Sometimes losing family members is the cost of protecting yourself and those who genuinely matter. After Dad mentioned his will, my sister became convinced I wasn't family and replaced my test results, but the evidence destroyed her lies. I'm 28. My sister Rachel is 31 years old. We've always had a decent relationship. We're not particularly tight, but we get along well at family gatherings and occasionally text each other, as is customary for siblings. Our father is fairly well off, owning a thriving contracting business that he started from nothing. Mom died 8 years ago from cancer. Dad began discussing amending his will approximately 6 months ago. Nothing dramatic, he simply stated that he wanted to ensure that everything was in order, possibly by establishing some trusts. It's rather natural for someone in their early 60s to be thinking about retirement and legacy preparation. Rachel and I are his only children, therefore we would split his assets. Rachel's behavior toward me has changed dramatically since then. I mean entirely different. She moved from being a normal sister to something I can't even describe. Suspicious and unfriendly. She keeps making bizarre comments about how I don't fit in with the family and how I've always been different. We were having dinner at Dad's house when she first said something. She was going through old family photos on his mantle and came across this image of me as a newborn. She stared at it for far too long before saying, "You know, you really don't look like either mom or dad in this picture." I shrugged it off because really newborn images are very useless for assessing family resemblance. All babies resemble wrinkly potatoes, but she kept going. "No, seriously. Look at your nose. Look at your eyes. Where did those features even come from?" She held the photograph up to my face. Dad was in the kitchen and did not hear this conversation, but I was starting to feel uneasy. I told her she was being odd and that many children do not look like their parents. I mean, genetics are complicated, right? Sometimes you inherit your great-grandmother's chin, your uncle's eye form, or whatever. But Rachel just gave me that look, as if I was lying about something. What really bothers me is how she started talking about me being false among other family members. At my cousin's birthday party last month, I overheard her telling our aunt that she had always felt something was wrong with me. When she noticed I was listening, she didn't even look ashamed. She simply shrugged and walked away. The strangest thing is that she has gotten concerned with family genetics and inheritance issues. She keeps telling stories about families who found horrific truths through DNA testing. She emailed me 3 separate articles about people discovering they were adopted or had different fathers. She is continuously highlighting how DNA does not lie, and how science can uncover the truth about family links. Last week, she cornered me at Dad's house and asked if I had ever pondered about my biological parents. I was in astonishment and didn't know what to say. I asked her what she meant, and she said she's been thinking about family genetics lately, and how different I am from everyone else in the family. I tried to talk to Dad about Rachel's conduct, but I didn't want to get too detailed because explaining it sounds insane. I just said that Rachel seems worried lately and has been saying strange things. He claimed he had noticed she had been more intense recently, but assumed it was due to work stress. The thing that is really playing with my head is Rachel's apparent total conviction in whatever hypothesis she has. She doesn't appear to be malicious or attempting to stir up trouble. She appears really persuaded that everyone is keeping a major secret about my parentage from her. But here's something I know for certain. I am Dad's biological child. I have his hands, his chuckle, and his inclination to become enraged at inanimate objects that don't work properly. I have Mom's stubbornness and strange double-jointed thumbs. I resemble both of them in distinct ways. I'm starting to wonder if Rachel is experiencing a mental health crisis. The timing of Dad's will update appears too serendipitous to overlook. Is she so concerned about inheritance that she has convinced herself I am not truly family? Is this a psychological response to Mom's passing that has only recently surfaced? I'm not sure what to do here. Rachel's conduct is becoming more intense, not less. She began making statements about DNA testing and uncovering the truth in front of Dad. He just laughs it off, but I can tell he is beginning to sense something is up with her. Any guidance would be greatly appreciated since I am utterly confused here. Update 1. So, remember how I mentioned she was obsessed with DNA testing and family genetics? So she's chosen to turn her hobby into a family pastime. Rachel arrived at Dad's place a few days after my initial post with her presentation on genealogy and family history. She'd printed out articles on DNA testing, family tree research, and genetic genealogy. She sold it as a fantastic bonding activity in which our entire extended family could help create a thorough family tree using DNA analysis. Her presentation was actually quite impressive. She had investigated various testing businesses, evaluated their accuracy rates, and examined their databases for genealogy information. She discussed how we may connect with distant relatives, identify family migration trends, and possibly answer some family mysteries regarding our great-great-grandparents. Dad became immediately fascinated. He is fascinated by family history and has long desired to trace our ancestors. Rachel had done her homework and knew precisely how to pique his interest. She discussed how we could identify ties to historical individuals or learn about family relatives who immigrated from Europe. But this is what made my skin crawl. Rachel insisted that everyone contribute to the project's success. She explained that DNA comparisons would only be useful if we had samples from numerous generations and family branches. She also underlined the importance of both Dad and I participating because we are the direct male bloodline. She made it sound really fair and scientific. She continued to discuss how DNA testing has improved to the point where it may disclose astonishing insights about family links and genetic inheritance patterns. She described how some families uncovered famous forebears or found kin they had no idea existed. The most deceptive part was how she packaged it as a gift for Dad. She stated that she intended to make this gorgeous family tree as a surprise for his next birthday, replete with DNA analysis and historical study. She presented it as a thoughtful, kind gesture from a daughter who wished to honor her father's interest in family history. Dad ate it thoroughly. He began talking about how much Mom would have enjoyed this endeavor, and how wonderful it would be to finally have answers to some of the gaps in our family knowledge. He quickly agreed to participate and began contacting other relatives to get them engaged. Rachel handled it very smoothly. She oversaw all logistics, ordered all of the test kits, and worked with family members. She appointed herself project manager and insisted on personally collecting all samples to ensure appropriate handling and delivery to the lab. Within a week, Mom had secured pledges from Dad, me, our 2 aunts, 3 cousins, and Dad's elderly uncle. Everyone was enthusiastic about the initiative. Our aunt even began going through old photo albums and paperwork to help with the study. But I understand what this is all about. Rachel is not interested in genealogy or family history. She is attempting to establish that I am not Dad's biological child. She is confident that when all of the DNA results are returned, mine will reveal that I am not genetically linked to the rest of the family. Instead of making straightforward allegations or confronting me privately, she devised this plot to make her look like the thoughtful, organized daughter while putting me in a situation where I can't refuse to participate without appearing suspicious. If I object to the DNA test, it will appear like I have something to hide. If I point out that Rachel's true purpose is to prove I'm adopted, I'll appear paranoid and defensive. She has driven me into a hole, and my only alternative is to go ahead with her plan and hope that the DNA findings definitively disprove her adoption claim. The worst part is seeing Dad become passionate about this idea. He has been calling me every few days to offer new information Rachel has discovered about genealogy research, or to discuss prospective familial links we may find. He has no idea that his daughter is using his interest in family history to try to prove that his son is not his biological son. I keep reminding myself that this will backfire spectacularly when the DNA results show that I am clearly Dad's child. Rachel will have to admit that her adoption notion is absolutely incorrect, and hopefully she will cease this preoccupation. Update 2. Rachel was in charge of coordinating everything, so the DNA test kits came at her apartment. She texted our family group chat that she had received all of the test kits and will distribute them so that everyone could submit samples. She explained that she wanted to gather them all at once and send them to the lab as a batch to ensure that they were processed together. I was scheduled to see her yesterday to pick up my kit, but I had to reschedule due to a business situation. I texted her that I'd come by today instead and get it. She said that was all right, and she'd leave it with her roommate if she wasn't home. I drove over to Rachel's apartment this afternoon. Her roommate allowed me in, and explained that Rachel was running errands but had left my test kit on the kitchen counter. There were 2 test kits on the kitchen countertop. So I took one and was about to go when I realized the box had already been opened. That looked strange because these kits are supposed to remain sealed until you're ready to utilize them. I opened the box to ensure everything was inside. And that's when I noticed that someone had already spit in the saliva collection tube. I stared at this tube for about 5 minutes, trying to figure out what I was seeing. The collection tube was supposed to be empty when I got it. I was meant to spit into it, seal it, and submit it to the lab, but the tube already had saliva. My first assumption was that Rachel had mistakenly handed me someone else's completed kit. Perhaps she messed up the boxes and gave me a relative's sample by mistake. But then I glanced through the documentation in the box, and it was evident that my name was on every form. That's when it struck me. Rachel planned to submit someone else's DNA sample under my name. I quickly called her to find out what was going on with my test kit. She seemed perplexed and asked what I meant. I told her that the collecting tube already contained saliva and that the form had my name on it, and there was a long quiet on the phone. Then she laughed and said it was all a joke. She explained that she was testing me to see if I would notice, and she was impressed that I did. She claimed she had filled the tube with her own saliva as a hoax and that she had my actual test kit waiting for me. I told her it wasn't humorous, that tampering with DNA samples was not a joke. She insisted it was all in good fun. When I came home, I thought about it again. I contacted her back and demanded to know whose DNA was in the collection tube. She tried to shrug me off again, but I persisted. Finally, she admitted to asking her friend Clara to supply the sample. Clara is Rachel's co-worker, and I've met her maybe twice at Rachel's events. She is not related to our family in any way. If Clara's DNA was submitted under my name, the findings would reveal no genetic tie with Dad or any of our other relatives. I questioned Rachel directly why she would do this. Why would she try to submit another person's DNA under my name? What did she hope to accomplish? That's when she stopped pretending it was a joke. She claimed she needed to know the truth about my parentage and was defending Dad's interests. She said that if I was really Dad's kid, I shouldn't be frightened to take the test properly. But if I had anything to hide, this would expose it. Her logic made no sense. She seemed to believe that submitting phony DNA under my name would reveal me as a fraud. For example, if the phony results revealed that I was unrelated to the family, her adoption argument would be proven right. I attempted to describe how insane this was. I informed her that contributing someone else's DNA would only confirm that Clara is unrelated to our family, which we already knew. It would not prove anything about my true genetic tie with Dad. But Rachel was not listening to logic. She insisted that I was hiding something, and that my reaction to her plan demonstrated my fear of the truth. She explained that if I was indeed Dad's biological son, I should have no trouble taking the DNA test legally. I assured her that I would take the test officially, but that I wanted a fully fresh kit that she had never handled. I stated that I would order my own test directly from the lab and submit it myself to ensure there was no tampering. Rachel became enraged and accused me of being paranoid and sabotaging the family genealogical effort. She claimed that everyone was thrilled about the research and that I was ruining it with my suspicious conduct. I pointed her that she was the one acting suspiciously by attempting to submit forged DNA samples. But she just continued deflecting and stating I was overreacting to what she described as a harmless prank. She hung up on me when I stated I was going to tell Dad about what she had tried to do. She quickly texted me, pleading me not to involve Dad and promised not to tamper with my actual DNA sample if I just let it go. I will not let this go. Rachel attempted to commit fraud by submitting someone else's DNA in my name. This goes much beyond bizarre suspicions regarding my parentage. I ordered my DNA test kit directly from the lab today. I'll submit an authentic sample and receive legitimate findings that indicate I'm Dad's kid. This is far worse than I expected. Update 3. The DNA results came back, and I am absolutely Dad's biological child. But Rachel's reaction to this proof has been utterly insane, and I'm beginning to worry about her mental health. I received my findings first because I ordered my individual kit directly from the lab while Rachel was still planning the family batch testing. My results were exactly what I expected, a 50% genetic match with Dad, unambiguous genetic ties with our aunts and cousins, and European ancestry that matches our known family background. Everything fit perfectly with what you'd expect from someone who is clearly a member of this family. I was genuinely relieved to hear scientific confirmation of something I'd never questioned. I hoped that this would finally put a stop to Rachel's odd adoption conspiracy and allow us to move on from the whole fiasco. I decided to show Rachel the results before telling the rest of the family. I believed this would offer her a chance to admit her mistake and perhaps apologize for all the allegations and sabotage attempts. This was a mistake. When I showed Rachel my DNA results, she stared at them for a long time, saying nothing. She then began asking extensive questions regarding the testing process. Where did I order the kit? How did I submit my sample? Was I sure the lab didn't mix up the samples? Had anyone else handled my testing kit? I indicated that I had ordered the kit directly from the company's website, submitted the sample myself, and monitored the entire process to ensure that there was no contamination or mix-up. The results were undeniably accurate. Rachel responded by accusing me of tampering with the exam. She argued the results couldn't be valid because she knew I wasn't Dad's biological child. She insisted that I had found a technique to manipulate the testing procedure. I asked her what evidence she had for believing I wasn't Dad's son, and she began listing utterly random things. She mentioned that I held my fork differently than Dad does. She claims my laugh sounds forced when I'm among relatives, and she believes I've always been too eager to fit in with the family, proving I don't truly belong. This is absolutely crazy reasoning. She's transforming ordinary human behaviors into evidence of a huge deceit about my parentage. But things get worse. Rachel has decided that everyone in the family should retake their DNA testing at a separate facility. She claims she does not trust the company we employed and believes we should seek independent verification of the data from a separate testing provider. She has been calling family members individually to offer her concept. She explains that DNA testing might be unreliable, and that results should be confirmed by various labs. The most manipulative aspect is how she frames things for Dad. She is not telling him that she believes I am adopted, or that she attempted to sabotage my original test. Instead, she presents herself as a meticulous researcher who wants to ensure that our family genealogical project contains the most accurate information available. Dad believes this is reasonable. He is unaware of Rachel's adoption notion or sabotage attempt. So to him, this appears to be Rachel's meticulous approach to the genealogy effort. He consented to take another test and invited other family members to take part in the expanded investigation. Rachel has already bought additional test kits from another company. She's organizing the collecting procedure again, which makes me worried after her prior sabotage attempt. But this time, I'll make sure Dad is present when I give my sample, and I'll photograph the sealed kit to record the chain of custody. The irritating part is that I know the new results will only confirm what we already know. I will take the test as Dad's biological child again since that is who I am. However, Rachel appears to be sure that a separate lab will generate results that support her adoption theory. I'm starting to suspect Rachel has developed some sort of mental disorder centered on my parentage. She developed this conspiracy hypothesis and now rejects any information that contradicts it. When reality doesn't fit her views, she concludes that reality must be incorrect. I am tempted to tell Dad everything, but I am afraid he will not believe me. Rachel's behavior appears so sensible on the surface that my charges may sound like psychotic babbling. She's also been careful not to express her adoption hypothesis in front of Dad explicitly. I believe my best plan is to proceed with a second round of testing and allow the data to speak for themselves. When the new lab certifies that I am Dad's biological child, Rachel will have to confront the truth that multiple independent tests have yielded the same result. This entire scenario has progressed from bothersome to actually concerning. I'm not only dealing with sibling rivalry or inheritance concern anymore, I believe Rachel is experiencing a psychiatric crisis and is obsessed with showing that I am not a member of the family. Update 4: I told Dad everything, and Rachel is no longer in my life. This entire thing has erupted in ways I never expected, and I'm honestly grateful it's finished. The second set of DNA tests yielded identical results as the first round. It's shocking, I know. I am still Dad's biological son, genetically connected to all of our relatives, and have the same heritage markers. The findings were basically photocopies of my first test. When Rachel was presented with identical data from 2 independent labs, I expected her to finally accept reality, but she doubled down more than ever. She immediately began investigating DNA testing accuracy rates, discovering some obscure reports on laboratory failures. She began to assert that both labs had made the same mistake, or that there was some sort of systemic contamination affecting my samples especially. However, she reached a breaking point when she began contacting other family members directly with her adoption notion. She had previously kept her doubts fairly hidden, but after the second round of test results revealed I was Dad's son, she evidently decided that subtlety was no longer an option. She called our cousin Ethan and expressed significant doubts about my origins, believing Dad was deceiving himself about having a biological son. She requested Ethan to assist her persuade Dad to request a third round of tests at a lab she would personally choose and oversee. This conversation confused Ethan totally. He immediately called Dad and informed him that Rachel appeared to be having a breakdown regarding family DNA and making odd assertions about me being adopted. Dad called me soon away and asked what the heck was going on. I realized I couldn't keep Rachel from acting out anymore. She had graduated to involve extended family in her delusions, and Dad deserved to know what his daughter was up to. I told him everything. Her months of suspicious comments and adoption implications, as well as her manipulation of the family genealogy project, were all attempts to reveal my alleged false paternity. Dad listened to the entire thing in total quiet. When I continued, there was a lengthy pause, and then he replied, "She's been trying to prove you're not my son." Why would she do that? I told him it was related to his will update, and Rachel appeared to be attempting to remove me from his inheritance. Dad became very silent and stated that he needed to speak with Rachel immediately. The confrontation with Rachel did not go well. Dad summoned her to his house and asked her directly whether she was doubting my parentage and attempting to prove I was adopted. Rachel initially denied it, but when Dad brought up the DNA test sabotage and her calls to family members, she felt there was no use in lying any longer. She revealed that she didn't believe I was Dad's biological son and had been trying to prove it for months. She claimed she was protecting Dad's interests and ensuring his inheritance went to his legitimate child. She stated she was doing this out of love and loyalty to her father. Dad asked her what possible evidence she had for believing I wasn't his kid, and Rachel began repeating the ludicrous remarks she had made with me. She also recounted some childhood recollections that she said were incompatible with me being his biological kid. Dad told her that her proof was utterly ludicrous and that she was attempting to destroy her brother's connection with his family based only on obsessive assumption. He stated he was ashamed of her actions and couldn't understand how she had convinced herself to be so nasty. Rachel burst into tears and insisted that she was correct about me, that the DNA tests were inaccurate, and that Dad was duped. She asked him to conduct one more round of testing at a lab that she would personally verify and oversee. That's when Dad lost his cool. He told Rachel she was insane and that her fixation with proving I wasn't his son had irreparably harmed our family. He said he couldn't trust her anymore and didn't want her around until she sought professional therapy for whatever psychiatric issues were causing her conduct. Rachel left Dad's place that day and has not communicated with either of us since. She has disabled my phone number and social media accounts. She's also supposedly blocked Dad because he claims his calls go directly to voicemail and his texts aren't delivered. Dad continued questioning why I hadn't notified him about Rachel's behavior sooner, and I answered that I hoped she'd come to her senses and didn't want to generate family turmoil over what appeared to be momentary paranoia. But Dad said he was relieved I finally told him the truth because Rachel's behavior had been escalating and may have become worse if left uncontrolled. Dad is determined that Rachel requires professional psychological assistance before he can consider having a relationship with her again. He has told her, through other family members, that he will pay for therapy if she is prepared to address whatever is driving her to this conduct, but that he will not allow any further contact until she admits that her adoption hypothesis was delusional. As for me, I'm done with Rachel for good. I don't care if she seeks assistance or admits she was wrong. She spent months attempting to undermine my bond with my father and separate me from my own family. She attempted fraud by submitting phony DNA samples in my name. She enlisted extended family members in her campaign against me. Dad has told me he is reconsidering several aspects of his estate planning. He won't give me any information, but I believe Rachel's inheritance status has changed dramatically. He has stated that trust and loyalty are significant variables in how he views family legacy. I understand that some people believe I should forgive Rachel if she seeks assistance and apologizes, but I am not interested in reconciliation. Certain betrayals are too basic to overcome. She attempted to erase me from my own family. That's not something I can get over. My father hid a daughter for years. Now her mother demands I evict my best friend so she can live with me, but I refuse to fix their broken family. When I was 14, my world was devastated. It immediately became clear that my father had been leading a secret life right beneath our eyes. He had fathered a kid with one of his staff, a 1-year-old girl without my mother's knowledge. Could you imagine? We were just your normal family. And then I realized I had a half-sister no one had ever mentioned. My brother, who is 2 years older than me, was so distraught that he cut off communication with our father for an entire year. And I could barely look him in the eyes after that. I never knew if my mother had known all along, or if she was simply heartbreakingly afraid of losing him. Perhaps it was because he had always been the breadwinner, earning a nice living and supporting all of us. Who knows? But I do recall her clinging to him through group therapy, counseling, and countless arguments. Against all obstacles, they remained together. After that much, you'd think he'd cut all contact with the other family permanently. But that never happened. He quit dating Karen's mother, although she remained a close friend. Surprisingly, my mother and the other woman appeared to have formed a strange sister-wife relationship. The entire experience was weird. Every holiday since then, Christmas, Easter, you name it, this woman would show up, knowing my father was married but still deciding to assist him damage our family. Her small child, my supposed sister, would also be there. And my brother and I were supposed to accept her as family. I simply couldn't do it. My brother took years to come around, and for a long, he skipped all holidays. But when Karen turned 4, he made an abrupt U-turn. He instantly chose to be her brother. He still refuses to speak to our father or Karen's mother, but he has somehow become Karen's protector. Maybe I sound bitter, but I have never considered Karen's mother as anything other than a homewrecker. And Karen, she was a living reminder of how everything had fallen apart. Intellectually, I knew my father was equally too responsible, but as a devastated teenager, it was always easier to aim my rage toward them. I made it plain. Karen would never become my sister. That single reality has resulted in years and years of animosity. No holiday or gathering has seemed right since. I could give you a detailed account of all the drama over the years, but it would take forever, and there is one major point here. Karen just decided to switch schools. Something happened at her previous one, but I honestly don't care about her high school drama. For perspective, in my nation, high schools can be specialized in areas such as painting, confectionery, and hairdressing. Karen withdrew out of her more general grammar high school, where she was struggling to keep up, and opted to try her hand at art school instead. She is not a prodigy, decent, but nothing spectacular, yet well enough to get into a highly recognized school. Coincidentally, the school is located close where I reside. Karen and her mother still live close to my parents, around 3 hours away, so getting to and from school would be difficult. 2 days ago, we had another awkward family meal. Yes, Karen and her mother were present, much to my dismay. The subject came up. Where was Karen planning to reside while attending school? I could tell they were circling around the genuine question, hoping I'd respond before they had to ask. When I didn't bite, they eventually spelled it out for me. Would I allow Karen to move in with me for the school year? Monday through Friday, she spends holidays with her mother. And get this. They marketed it as a major benefit to her because I also work in art. Suddenly, my so-called useless illustration business provided the ideal atmosphere for their darling kid. Let me explain why I'm saying no. First, there are decent dorms close to campus. Certainly not a 5-star motel, but ideal for a high school student. Second, I don't like Karen. I've always been open about our lack of relationship and no shared DNA will miraculously heal that. Third, my brother lives less than an hour away from the art school. He doesn't live next door, yet he gets along well with her. Fourth, when I went to Karen's mother for support during a difficult time and begged for a favor, she laughed in my face and flatly informed me we were not family. But now, we're only family when it suits her. Fifth, my flat is modest, and while I officially have a second bedroom, it is rented to my best buddy. I'm not kicking my closest friend out, no matter what guilt trip anyone tries to put on me. Sixth, they never asked, rather, they demanded. When I hesitated, they swooped upon me like vultures. Karen has anxiety. Dorm living would be hard on her. You're her only real sister. God wants us to be a family. I hold no religious beliefs. My brother's girlfriend is pregnant and nervous around strangers, so Karen can't stay there. And I should just evict my roommate because family comes first. The ridiculousness. To be honest, I could tell from how they were acting that they wanted me to hold out for a polite period of time before giving in. But the moment the argument heated up and people began shouting, I dropped all pretense and simply said no. That was it. Karen raced out of the home in sobs, and everyone else became silent. I was instructed to leave, so I did, and someone said something ridiculous about how I should go sign up for kindergarten because I clearly wasn't acting like an adult. Karen's mother later messaged me, and I marked her as read. My father tried calling, but I didn't answer. I refuse to be pushed, yelled at, or guilt-tripped into doing anything I find very unpleasant. I know it's not Karen's fault she ended up in this mess, but she's not my family, and I don't owe her anything in my life, let alone my house. That is where I stand. Update 1. When I arrived home, I found Karen sobbing on the sofa, her face buried in her hands, completely unraveling. My roommate instantly grabbed me aside and explained what had just transpired. Karen apparently arrived expecting to meet me and was surprised to find my roommate instead. She instantly inquired whether my roommate was visiting or about to leave, to which my roommate responded calmly that she was neither. That created a one-sided dispute, with Karen getting louder and louder as my roommate tried to calm her down and de-escalate the situation. Karen soon appeared to be experiencing a breakdown. My roommate described it as a panic attack, and I have no reason to dispute her at all. But as soon as Karen noticed me, her meltdown changed course. She began yelling at me, calling me a terrible sister, a liar, and a leech, and hurled more accusations my way. I could understand the nasty sister aspect, but being a liar and a leech ached. I tried not to snap back, kept my cool, and eventually calmed her down enough to discuss without revealing our family crisis to the entire building. That's when the truth started to emerge. Molly and my father had been using the prospect of Karen living with me and attending that prestigious art high school as leverage for at least 6 months. Since Karen opted to quit her stepping stone high school, they have thrown it at her repeatedly. You will not be able to live with your sister unless you maintain decent marks. Clean your room or turn in your phone. Even worse, they requested that she drop her friends and delete her social media accounts. Essentially, the prospect of living with me had been dangled in front of her for years. I felt terrible when I realized that. To be honest, I didn't disbelieve her story for 1 second. It was classic Dad. Growing up, he used to promise us enormous things and make us cry in the hopes that he would eventually deliver. Perhaps not. Molly apparently went so far as to tell Karen that I had consented to a 1-week trial run and that she would then spend the rest of the summer at her father's house to prepare for the actual relocation. I had no clue they'd promised her that, especially since I'd made it clear from the start that I opposed the notion. Looking back, perhaps they assumed that if Karen came up at my house, I'd simply yield, having stepped back so many times in the past to keep the peace. Perhaps having Karen there in my home would make it impossible for me to refuse. And I would have let myself to get steamrolled again so as not to ruin her fantasy. The whole thing sucked. But for the first time, Karen and I genuinely spoke, really chatted. We spent 40% of the time trash-talking our shared parent. 40% were ranting about Molly. And the rest was entirely about art. Oddly enough, I discovered a silver lining in that catastrophe. I'm not saying I'm suddenly ready to be the doting big sister or take her home, but for once, there was some genuine connection behind the anguish. She eventually flopped on my bed and fell asleep before her parents arrived to fetch her up. I waited there, emotionally tired. My father finally arrived at 11 p.m., furious that Karen had fallen asleep and perplexed that I hadn't simply let her spend the night. But I became even furious. After piecing together Karen's story, I was itching to hear his side as well. At the very least, he listened. I let off a 5-minute rant so quickly that I could hardly breathe. And by the time he managed to say something, I doubt he remembered half of what I had said. I hardly gave him a chance. He only told me that he'd call me later to adequately address it. Now I'm waiting for that call. Feeling emptier than ever. I'm so emotionally spent that I can barely think straight at work. I ended up staying at a friend's apartment for the night. Nothing romantic. Just the comfort of platonic connection. Which we have had since we were children. I know I have a lot to figure out, so I've started building a list of everything I need to accomplish when I get the motivation to try again. Right now, all I want is some clarity and tranquility, if I can find it. Update 2. I apologize for the silence. Life has been so hectic that finding time or energy to update seemed impossible. But I have to explain what happened. I really enjoyed all of the advice and knowing that I wasn't insane, even if this update will probably disappoint anyone expecting for a good conclusion. Karen, my half-sister, appeared at my door not long after everything had gone wrong, as if the universe was playing a cruel little joke on me. The timing could not have been more absurd. I did not squander a second. I contacted my father and informed him that unless he picked her up right away, I would contact the police. He arrived, claiming that he would explain everything. But predictably, it took some serious cornering before he said anything. Perhaps he thought that if he told me just enough, I would stop bothering him. But I needed answers, so I met with him face to face last week. He had no way out at that point. What I discovered was every bit as wild as I had expected. Karen's mother, Molly, as I've dubbed her, was in grave financial problems. Part of me wanted to blame it on her being too young to have a child, but Molly's overall sense of maturity seems stunted. Perhaps there was a traumatic childhood. Perhaps not. I don't care at this moment since whatever happened, Karen is the one who is suffering the price. Molly had created a pile of debt for herself by taking out too many loans with no practical possibility of repaying them. She is currently losing everything as a result of the debt reduction process. Even her pay is being reduced by the state, leaving her with barely enough to exist. To make ends meet, she decided to sell her flat and move into something so little that I literally cringed when I saw it. She wanted to stay at my father's house, but fortunately my mother had already established tough boundaries. Molly and Karen were not allowed to stay at the house for more than a week. Only on special occasions, such as when Molly's building was being constructed. What's her plan? Purchase this pretentious chicken coop of a studio apartment and squeeze herself and Karen into the cramped area. The rationale must have been, perhaps someone else will step in to help, because I was suddenly receiving guilt-tripping indications that I should take Karen in, as if that would solve everything. Despite my instincts, I let Karen to stay with me for a while. It was disastrous. Living with her was impossible. I never recognized how distressed she was because I never spent enough time with her to fully understand it. She was troubled by night terrors, leaving my best friend, a true light sleeper who has a physically demanding job, weary every day. Furthermore, Karen appeared to be allergic to cleaning and snatched my watch. After that, I called my father and told him I wasn't going to put up with this longer. My father begged me, virtually groveling to let her stay. He promised she'd get better. But, even if it were true, I wasn't going to be the one going through it. I drew a line in the sand. I would only consider bringing Karen in provided she attended therapy. However, Molly, in her infinite wisdom, does not believe in therapy. Of course. Honestly, I should not have been surprised. I expected my father to step up and take Karen in, but my mother was insistent. She flatly refused. That resulted in a massive dispute. And in the end, my mother had a panic attack and was hospitalized. That was the last straw. Karen was sent back to her mother. Molly was furious. At me, not at her own decisions. According to her, I am the only person in the world who could provide them with a proper home, but I am simply too nasty to make room for them. Hatred is her word. But to be honest, a part of me is genuinely upset, enraged at being put in this situation. Then my brother got involved, berating me for not stepping up, despite the fact that he owns a house. But of course, he has a newborn baby, which is meant to relieve him of all responsibility while shifting all of it to me. He had the audacity to argue that blood should be thicker than water. When I told him that my best friend lives with me, he acted as if my blood was irrelevant in this situation. Now it appears like everything is in limbo. My father is constantly trying to wear down my mother, and when he isn't bickering with her, he makes passive-aggressive insults at me. Molly bombards me with her own brand of guilt-inducing messages, while my brother no longer bothers to hide his disgust. I'm not sure how much more of this I can take. I'm definitely considering cutting everyone off entirely. It's honestly devastating to see my entire family turn against me. At least I have a best friend. She's probably the only nice thing to come out of this situation. I still feel bad about putting her through exhaustion and allowing my father to manipulate me for so long, but I'm eternally grateful she's still with me. Update 3. I thought it couldn't be any worse. I was mistaken. Last Tuesday, my best friend arrived home from work looking really exhausted. At first, I assumed it was simply another horrible day at her job. But when she sat me down with that serious expression that I'd only seen twice in our 15-year friendship, my stomach fell. She had been receiving calls, anonymous ones, always while I wasn't around. The caller would hang up as soon as she answered, but she could hear background noise, a television and children playing. It was creepy enough that she had started allowing calls to go to voicemail. Molly arrived at her workplace 3 days ago. My best buddy works at a veterinary clinic and Molly walked in, claiming she needed to address critical family concerns involving me. She accosted my friend during her lunch break and went on this insane rant about how I was poisoning everyone against Karen. I was so selfish and callous. And, this is where things get really crazy, how my friend was facilitating my cruelty by staying with me instead of making room for actual family. My friend, bless her, told Molly where she could shove her opinions and threatened to contact security. But Molly was not done. She even had the nerve to offer my friend money, 2 months' rent, to move out temporarily so Karen could have the room. When my pal rejected, Molly's facade slipped completely. She began yelling about how my friend was a leech living off me. How she was probably sleeping with me anyway, and how no true friend would get in the way of family. Molly had to be escorted out by security, but not before she shouted loudly enough for the entire waiting area to hear that my buddy was a homewrecker who kept sisters apart. My poor friend was horrified, especially because her employer and numerous clients witnessed the entire episode. But here's when things get very twisted. When I approached my father about Molly's actions, expecting him to be shocked, he instead attempted to defend her. "She's desperate," he explained. "You have to understand, she's losing everything." When I pointed out that harassment and workplace stalking are unacceptable regardless of someone's financial condition, he had the audacity to claim that if I had just aided the family from the start, none of this would have happened. That's when it clicked. I asked him directly if he knew about Molly's plot to harass my friend. The stillness was so extended that I feared the phone had been dropped. Finally, he acknowledged that Molly had stated that she might try to reason with my roommate personally. He did not stop her. He knew she was going to ambush my pal at work, but he did nothing. I was so upset that I couldn't talk, but then he delivered another bombshell. Apparently my mother has been having what he refers to as episodes since the hospital incident. She's been obsessed with the whole thing, staying up all night studying Karen's new school, and even calling the admissions office pretending to be Karen's guardian to inquire about housing choices. My father appears really concerned about her mental health. But instead of getting her professional assistance, he's been attempting to address the problem by pressuring me to take Karen in. "If you just agree to let her stay for the school year," he added, "your mother could finally have peace. We could all move past this." The deception was so obvious that it made me laugh, a bitter, hollow sound that astonished even me. I explained to him that it was not my obligation to improve Mom's mental health at the expense of my own peace and safety. That's when he completely lost it. "Safety," he said. "She's a 17-year-old girl, not a criminal. Your own sister." "Half-sister," I clarified. "And not by choice." He hung up on me. 2 days later, my brother arrived at my apartment unexpectedly. I should have known something was up when he knocked instead of just strolling in, as he always does. He appeared weary. The baby has been keeping him up, and his girlfriend has been struggling with postpartum depression. I felt a tinge of sympathy until he began speaking. Dad contacted him with a new solution. My brother's house has more space, and he's allegedly on better terms with Karen, so perhaps she should move in with him. But here's the kicker. His girlfriend flatly refused. She's already struggling enough without adding a difficult adolescent, especially one who has night terrors and behavioral issues. Naturally, my brother decided it was all my fault. If I had taken Karen in from the start, none of them would be experiencing this stress. His lover would not be weeping herself to sleep due to Dad's pressure. Mom would not be experiencing breakdowns. Everyone's troubles would be solved if I simply did the right thing. I mentioned that he might have offered to take Karen himself months ago, but he shook his head. "I never wanted her living with us," he told me. "But you live alone with just a friend. You have the space, you work from home. It makes sense. The arrogance was astonishing. When I informed him that I'd already tried living with Karen and it had been a disaster, he remarked that perhaps I hadn't tried hard enough. Maybe if I'd been more patient, understanding and sisterly, I'd have had enough. I told him that if he was worried about family duties, he could move his pregnant girlfriend and newborn baby in with Dad and Mom, freeing up his home for Karen and Molly. The expression on his face was priceless, complete terror at the concept. "That's completely different," he exclaimed. "I have a family to think about." "So do I," I said. "My chosen family. My friend who's been with me through everything while you all demand I throw her out for someone who stole from me." He departed after that, but not before informing me that I was being selfish, and would later regret pushing everyone away. Maybe he is right. Maybe I'm selfish. But I'm tired of being the family's scapegoat, the one everyone expects to give up her happiness and stability to keep the peace. I'm tired of being guilt-tripped, manipulated, and having my boundaries violated. My companion and I have begun looking at flats in a different section of the city, somewhere my family is unaware of. I haven't informed them yet, but I believe I'm done with everything. With each of them. The saddest part? I really feel horrible for Karen. Nothing is actually her fault. She's merely a child caught in the midst of adult chaos. But I can't save her without destroying myself, and I've finally accepted that it's not my responsibility to try. Update 4. I never imagined I'd be back here writing another update. But life has a terrible sense of humor. The apartment hunting did not go as planned. It turns out that finding a suitable home that welcomes pets within our budget, my friend has a cat, I failed to mention, is more difficult than imagined. But it is the least of our current issues. 3 weeks ago my buddy Anna returned home, looking as if she had seen a ghost. I was in the middle of a client call when she rushed through the door, so I had to finish up fast before she could tell me what occurred. She was at the grocery store when she ran into Maris, my brother's girlfriend. Maris apparently looked horrible. Dark circles and disheveled. The works. Maris burst into tears right in the cereal aisle after what should have been a courteous hello. Between sobs, Maris told Anna everything. My brother has been putting intense pressure on her to reconsider taking Karen in. He comes home every day with new arguments. Karen's grades are dropping. Living in that small studio with Molly has made her depressed. It's only temporary till they figure something else out. But Maris is struggling to keep her head above water with the baby and her postpartum depression. The thought of adding a wild teenager to the mix made her fear. Here's where things get twisted. My brother supposedly told Maris that I'd largely agreed to accept Karen but was just being picky about practicalities. He made it sound as if I was playing games while a child was suffering. Maris felt bad about denying because, in her perspective, I was already willing to help but only needed to be convinced correctly. Anna, bless her, corrected the record right away. She told Maris everything that had transpired, including the theft, night terrors, and Molly's job harassment. Maris became pale and inquired why no one had told her about this. That's when Anna learned my brother was lying to everyone, weaving different versions of the narrative to make them feel bad. But wait, things get worse. Maris apologized to Anna before saying something that made my blood run cold. I just wish I understood why he's so desperate to help her now when he completely ignored her for years. When Anna asked what she meant, Maris said that my brother had been having secret phone chats with someone while constantly stepping outdoors or going to the garage. She assumed it was work-related, until she overheard a portion of a chat last week. She remembered what he said. "I know, but I can't keep doing this forever, and she doesn't suspect anything, but the guilt is killing me." Maris confronted him on it that night. He broke down and said that he had been sending money to Molly. Not just recently. For years. Molly apparently contacted him shortly after Karen's birth, alleging she was struggling financially and that Dad was not providing adequate support. My brother, feeling bad for first rejecting Karen, began sending her money on a monthly basis. Small quantities at initially, then gradually increased as Molly's demands grew. The actual kicker? Molly had been telling him that Dad was unaware of the payments and that they needed to remain hidden because Dad was already doing so much. She portrayed herself as a struggling single mother who was too proud to seek for extra assistance from Dad. My brother ate it up, most likely because it helped him feel like a good brother without having to have a relationship with Karen. But this is where the plot takes a dramatic left turn. Maris dug through my brother's bank transactions and discovered that he had sent Molly more than $15,000 in the previous 3 years. $15,000, money that should have been spent on their home, wedding, and baby preparations. Maris was furious, but my brother asked her not to say anything because he was trying to fix the situation. That's why he's been so desperate to get Karen to move elsewhere. Molly had threatened to inform Dad about the money if the installments stopped. She said she'd tell Dad that my brother had been privately supporting his daughter for years while publicly rejecting her, making him look like a huge hypocrite. My brother got caught up in this blackmail scheme, and his answer was to get me to accept Karen so that the pressure would be lifted off him. Anna came home with all of this knowledge, and I honestly had no idea what to do with it. Part of me felt vindicated. I sensed something was wrong with my brother's abrupt change of heart. But largely I felt sick. For years the entire family has lied to and manipulated one another. I chose to call Maris directly. She was afraid to speak at first, but eventually everything came out. She's considered leaving my brother over this. Not just the money, though that was horrible enough, but the lies, the manipulation, and the way he has made her feel guilty for preserving her mental health. She said she didn't even remember who she married anymore. That conversation altered everything for me. I saw my brother wasn't simply being manipulative with Karen. He had been lying for years, just like his father. The apple doesn't fall far from its tree. I told Maris she deserved more and that nothing was her fault. I also informed her that if she ever needed a place to stay while she straightened things out, my couch was open. Not for Karen or my brother, but for her and the baby if they required an escape. She burst into tears and said how she had felt alienated, as if everyone in the family was against her for not bringing Karen in. Knowing the reality about why my brother was so persistent made her feel less insane, but also more hurt. What is the strangest part? She asked if I thought she should inform Dad about the money. I told her it was her decision, but Dad was probably already aware. Call it intuition, but the entire thing reeks of secrets inside secrets. 2 days later, Dad showed up at my door again. But this time, he appeared defeated rather than enraged. He sat down firmly on my couch and stated, "We need to talk about your brother." It turns out I was correct. Dad had known about the payments for several months. He discovered them by mistake, when my brother sent a payment confirmation email to Dad's address rather than his own. Apparently their email addresses are similar, and it was an autofill error. Dad approached Molly, who broke down and revealed she had been influencing my brother for many years. But here's the bit that made me want to scream. Dad had been allowing it to continue since it put less strain on him to support Molly and Karen. He was essentially allowing my brother to subsidize his mistake while presenting himself as the good man attempting to bring the family together. The web of falsehoods and deception is so complex that just thinking about it makes me dizzy. Dad is leveraging my brother's guilt to dodge his own obligations. My brother is using manipulation to try to force me to solve his blackmail problem. Molly uses everyone else's guilt to pay her lifestyle. Mom is most likely having breakdowns because she perceives all of the falsehoods, even if she is unaware of the specifics. And me? I appear to be the only one who has been open about not wanting to be a part of this disaster, which somehow makes me the villain. Dad asked if I would consider taking Karen now that I understood the whole truth. I laughed, really laughed, and told him that learning about even more layers of falsehoods and manipulation didn't make me any more willing to participate. That's when he dropped the ultimate bombshell. He and Mom are thinking about divorce. Mom discovered that he knew about the payments and feels betrayed all over again. She has been staying at her sister's place for the previous week, so my brother's marriage is crumbling. My parents are about to divorce. Molly is undoubtedly worried about her money source running out, and Karen is still caught in the center of all this adult dysfunction. And I'm still the terrible guy for wanting to keep out of the situation. I don't know how to feel anymore. Part of me wants to tell everyone to figure it out for themselves and block all of their numbers. But another part of me, probably the one taught by years of family guilt, wonders if I should try to help in some way. Anna believes I should keep far away from all of them. She's undoubtedly correct, but it's difficult to watch your entire family crumble, especially when you know they brought it on themselves. I suppose we'll see what happens next. My stepsister sobbed that no one would ever love her, then tried to seduce my boyfriend, and my stepmom told me to hand him over. I, a 24-year-old female, need to get this off my chest because I keep wondering if I am the insane one here. This includes my stepmother Margaret, 52, my stepsister Clara, 22, my father Daniel, 55, and my partner of 3 years, Ethan, 26. It's critical to understand how we arrived here. When I was 8 years old, my biological mother abandoned us. She packed her luggage one morning while my father was at work and I was in school. I returned home to find a note on the kitchen counter stating that she could no longer take being a mother. My father had to explain to an 8-year-old why mommy was not coming back. He raised me alone for 2 years. When I was 10 years old, my father met Margaret during a parent-teacher conference. Her daughter, Clara, was in my grade but attended a different school. Clara was born with spinoipeda and needed a wheelchair. Margaret was newly divorced and was working as a substitute teacher to make ends meet. My father operated a successful small plumbing business. Margaret began to come over more frequently. She would invite Clara over for play dates, and eventually she would stay for dinner. I recall being overjoyed to have another girl around, especially one who appeared so kind. Clara was shy and quiet, but always respectful to grown-ups. She looked at you with large eyes that made you want to protect her. My father and Margaret married when I was 12. Margaret left her substitute teaching position because my father's business was flourishing and he could support all of us. We relocated to a larger house with wheelchair access for Clara. Margaret took care of the house while my father worked long hours. Clara and I shared the upstairs, but she had the room with the stair lift. The first several years were good. Margaret made sure I didn't feel excluded, even though Clara required more attention owing to her medical appointments and physical therapy sessions. She helped me with my homework, attended my soccer games, and ensured that I had all I needed for school. Clara and I got on well enough. We watched movies together, and she helped me with math while I assisted her with English. When I was 15, I met Ethan at a summer camp for disabled youngsters and their siblings. The camp organized activities that mixed typical and handicapped children. I was there for Clara, and Ethan was there for his younger brother, who has autism. Ethan was 17 at the time and had already started working part-time while finishing high school. He was gentle with Clara throughout the camp activities and made her giggle a lot. She appeared more extroverted around him than with others. After camp concluded, Ethan began visiting our house. He made friends with Clara first. Actually, she enjoyed talking to him about books and movies. He treated her like any other teenager, not as someone to be pitied. My father liked him since he was respectable and had a job. Margaret seems happy that Clara had gained a friend. Over the next 2 years, Ethan became a regular visitor to our house. He would visit after school and on weekends. Clara always looked up when he arrived. She began inquiring when he was coming over and became unhappy if he canceled plans. I didn't think much of it at the moment. I was preoccupied with my own high school activities and a part-time work in a clothing store. During my senior year, something changed. Ethan started asking me to hang out without Clara on occasion. We began talking more while she was not present. He helped me prepare for my SATs and drove me to job interviews. One evening in the spring, while we were sitting on the back porch after Clara had gone inside, he told me he had liked me for a while but didn't want to make things awkward because we were all friends. We began dating the summer before I left for college. Clara's demeanor altered instantly. She got grumpy and abrupt with me. Whether Ethan came over, she monopolized his attention and became irritated whether he wanted to spend time with both of us or just me. Margaret observed the shift and questioned me about it. I told her I suspected Clara had formed a crush on Ethan. Margaret nodded and said she would speak with her about it. I attended college 3 hours away while Ethan remained local and began working full-time at an auto repair shop. Clara began her senior year in high school. During my travels home, I observed Clara was still cool toward me, but Margaret said that she was simply adjusting to my absence at college. Ethan and I maintained a long-distance romance for 2 years. He paid me visits at school whenever he could, and I returned home on holidays and weekends. We got along well, despite the fact that the distance was difficult at times. Clara gradually warmed up to me again, but she continued to act weirdly while Ethan was present. After graduating from college, I briefly returned home to look for work. Ethan and I discussed moving in together after I found a steady job. That's when things became odd again. Clara had recently started community college and was taking online classes because it was more convenient for mobility. She spent most of her time at home and Margaret had started working part-time at the library. Clara kept inquiring about Ethan. When was he coming over? Could she phone him and inquire about something? Did I imagine he'd want to watch a specific movie with her? Ethan stopped over one afternoon while I was attending a job interview. When I arrived home, Dad grabbed me aside and said Clara was acting strangely. She had recommended they watch a romantic movie and was attempting to persuade him to sit closer to her on the couch. When he kept his distance, she burst into tears, claiming that no one would ever love her due to her condition. Ethan felt bad, but claimed he had manufactured an excuse to depart early. I told Margaret about it that evening. She listened, then stated that she would handle it. She reminded me that Clara has minimal social engagement and may not grasp proper boundaries. I accepted the explanation and attempted to be more understanding. 2 weeks later, I started working for a marketing agency in the next town over. Ethan and I discovered a little apartment that we could afford together. Margaret's face became pale when I told her about our upcoming move. Clara began crying and dashed to her room. My father seemed pleased for us, but Margaret barely talked the remainder of the evening. Margaret's attitude cooled during the next month as Ethan and I prepared to move. She mentioned how I was departing my family and how Clara would miss me. Clara alternated between absolutely ignoring me and being excessively clingy. She began to attend more medical appointments and complain about pain more regularly. Clara had what Margaret described as a panic attack a week before we were planned to relocate. She hyperventilated and stated she couldn't take my departure. Margaret insisted on postponing the relocation until Clara felt more stable. My father supported Margaret's proposal. Ethan was frustrated, but he decided to wait a few more weeks. Clara's bouts increased in frequency throughout the course of those weeks. When relocation plans came up, she would have breathing problems or complain of extreme pain. Margaret booked further doctor appointments and stated that the physicians were concerned about Clara's stress levels. My father asked me to be patient and understanding. This pattern maintained for 2 months. Every time Ethan and I tried to schedule a move, Clara had a medical emergency. Margaret would add that the physicians advised against making any big changes in Clara's environment. I began to assume the incidents were not wholly medical, but I felt bad for believing so. Margaret approached me last month and requested a private conversation. She expressed concern about Clara's mental health and mentioned that doctors had indicated Clara would benefit from having Ethan around more often because he tended to calm her down. Margaret requested if Ethan might spend more time at home, possibly even moving into our extra room temporarily, to assist Clara acclimate to the changes. I told Margaret that Ethan was my boyfriend, not Clara's babysitter, and that we had separate plans. Margaret's expression changed. She expressed disappointment with my selfishness and that I did not comprehend how much Clara had been through in her life. She claimed Clara deserved to be happy as well, and that keeping Ethan away from her was cruel. That talk troubled me for several days. When I informed Ethan about it, he was stunned. He stated that he had never indicated to Clara that he was romantically interested in her, and Margaret's proposal made him uncomfortable. Yesterday, things came to a head. Margaret invited me to meet her in a coffee shop to talk. She appeared nervous, which is rare for her. She began by describing how much she had done for me over the years. How she had treated me like her own daughter, and how she had always prioritized my needs. Then she uttered something that made my blood turn cold. She told me Clara was madly in love with Ethan and that her medical episodes were genuine, but were caused by seeing Ethan with me. She explained that Clara had told her that she thought Ethan liked her as well, but was only with me out of responsibility because we had been friends before. Margaret then asked me to break up with Ethan. She explained that it would be a temporary sacrifice that would allow Clara to determine whether she and Ethan were compatible. She promised that if their relationship didn't work out, I could have Ethan back. She said this was my chance to repay her for all the years she had treated me like a mother. I stared at her for a long time, attempting to comprehend what she was asking. I informed her that Ethan was not a toy to be handed around, and that he had never expressed romantic interest in Clara. Margaret claimed that men didn't always know what they wanted, and that Ethan might surprise himself if he gave Clara a chance. Margaret burst into tears as I declined. She said I was selfish and didn't comprehend what it was like to see your child suffer. She said Clara might never find love because of her disabilities, but Ethan was gracious enough to look past it. She begged me to think about what was best for our family. I left the coffee shop without answering her. I drove directly to Ethan's job and told him everything. His reaction was fast and powerful. He described Margaret's request as inappropriate and manipulative. He told me that he had no love feelings for Clara, and would never have them. Now I'm here at our apartment, which we finally received last week despite the family drama, trying to figure out what to do next. Margaret has been calling and messaging me frequently. My father called this morning, asking why I was upsetting Margaret and what was so important that I couldn't compromise for Clara's sake. I haven't told my father exactly what Margaret requested me to do because I don't think he'd believe me. Margaret has always been adept at portraying herself as the rational one who simply wants everyone to be happy. I'm also concerned about what will happen to Clara if everything comes out. But I can't stop thinking about Margaret's request. The more I think about it, the more I realize it has been happening for years. All those times Clara became upset when Ethan and I spent time together. All of the medical issues that conveniently occurred as we attempted to go forward with our relationship. Margaret called me selfish for desiring my own life. Am I wrong to decline Margaret's request? Is there a compromise I'm not seeing? I love my family, but I don't believe I can give up my relationship to make Clara happy. Ethan has been nothing but kind to her, but that does not imply he owes her a sexual connection. I keep debating whether I should tell my father what Margaret wanted me to do. Part of me believes he deserves to know, but I'm also terrified it will destroy our family. Margaret has been a nice stepmother to me in many respects, and I don't want to cause her or Clara any unnecessary pain. How would you handle my situation? Update 1. I didn't plan to be back so soon, but things have taken an unexpected turn. Thank you to everyone who responded to my first post. Many of you felt I should tell my father what Margaret had requested me to do, and you were correct. After posting, I spent several days attempting to figure out how to approach the situation. Margaret kept phoning and texting, imploring me to reconsider her plea. She began giving me articles on how difficult it is for people with disabilities to find love, and how critical it is for family members to support one another. Clara was also texting me, but her messages were different. She kept inquiring when Ethan would come over again, and if he had mentioned her. Ethan was becoming frustrated with the situation. He explained that the frequent family drama was damaging our relationship, and that we needed to set some limits. He suggested I speak with my father and get things out in the open. He was correct, but I kept putting it off for fear of what might happen. Last Tuesday, someone made the decision for me. I was at work when my father contacted me, upset and bewildered. He stated Margaret had informed him that Ethan and I had split up, and that Ethan was now interested in Clara. According to Margaret, I was being difficult and interfering with their new relationship. I was so shocked that I couldn't talk for a time. My father went on to add that Margaret was concerned that I was struggling to accept the shift and that I might need some time away from the family to digest it. He suggested that I stay at Ethan's apartment for a while to allow everyone time to acclimate. That's when I learned how far Margaret would go with her deception. She had planned to drive the issue by lying to my father and portraying it as a done thing. I informed my father that Margaret had lied to him and that Ethan and I were still very much together. He appeared perplexed and stated that he would need to talk to Margaret about the misunderstanding. I left work early and drove directly home. Margaret and Clara were in the kitchen, and as I entered they both fell quiet. I asked Margaret why she had informed my father that Ethan and I had broken up. She became uneasy and stated that there had been a misunderstanding. She claimed she was talking hypothetically about what might happen if I opted to prioritize Clara's needs. Clara sat at the kitchen table, glancing back and forth with us. I could tell she was aware of what was going on, but I was unsure how much Margaret had informed her about her plans. I asked Clara directly if Margaret had informed her that Ethan and I had split up. Clara nodded, saying Margaret had told her that Ethan would be spending more time with her and less time with me. That's when I discovered Clara was involved, at least partially. Margaret had been preparing her for the desired conclusion, most likely raising her hopes. I questioned Clara if she truly believed Ethan had romantic feelings for her. She became defensive, claiming that Ethan was always kind to her and had told her she was beautiful and intelligent. I asked when Ethan had said such things. Clara described interactions that seemed friendly and supportive, rather than amorous. Ethan had never said anything untoward to her, but Margaret had obviously misinterpreted his generosity as romantic desire and shared her thoughts with Clara. When my father returned home from work, I wanted to speak with him quietly. I told him everything, from Margaret's request at the coffee shop to her lies about Ethan and I's breakup. My father listened without interrupting, and his look became more serious as I spoke. After I finished, my father remained silent for a long time. He then stated that he needed to hear Margaret's side of the story before making any judgments. He summoned Margaret into the room and asked her to explain what was happening. Margaret's tale was completely different than mine. She claimed I was rude to Clara about her love for Ethan, and that I threatened to keep Ethan away from the family if Clara didn't stop having crushes on him. She clarified that she had just suggested that I consider Clara's sentiments when making relationship decisions, not that I break up with Ethan. She said I misunderstood and exaggerated her request. Clara corroborated Margaret's version of events. She claimed I had been rude to her about Ethan, and Margaret was only trying to protect her. She claimed she never requested Ethan and me to break up, but it upset her when I acted as if she wasn't allowed to have feelings. My father stared between us, evidently trying to figure out who was telling the truth. He explained that this was a complicated scenario in which we all needed to calm down and find a way to work together. He recommended family counseling to help us communicate better. At that point, I understood Margaret had planned this confrontation. She had prepped Clara with a story that portrayed me as the villain and herself as a protecting mother. She'd undoubtedly been working on this story for weeks, knowing I'd ultimately tell my father about our talk. I informed my father that I would not be engaging in family counseling because Margaret had already demonstrated that she would lie to manipulate the situation. I explained that I needed some time apart from the family to consider whether I wanted to continue a connection with individuals who treated me this way. My father became enraged and accused me of being overly dramatic. He stated that families go through difficult times, and that walking away was not the solution. He accused me of being difficult and selfish, as my biological mother had been. That comment hit me hard. I'd spent my entire youth trying not to be like my original mother, who had abandoned us when things became tough. But I recognized that remaining in a position in which I was being misled and lied to was not loyalty, it was simply tolerating abuse. I packed my stuff and went to stay with Ethan. That was 2 weeks ago, and I have not returned to the house since. My father has called multiple times, wanting me to come home and talk things out. Margaret has sent messages apologizing for the misunderstanding and stating that she only wants the best for everyone. Clara texted to ask why I am being so harsh to the family. But this is what really upsets me. None of them have admitted what truly occurred. Margaret has not revealed that she asked me to break up with Ethan. Clara has not admitted that she hoped I would. My father has not admitted that Margaret lied to him about Ethan and my breakup. Instead, they're all acting as if this is just a family feud that got out of control. They want me to return and pretend nothing happened, to resume normalcy. But I can't do it now that I know Margaret's capabilities and how far she's willing to go to accomplish what she wants for Clara. Ethan has been absolutely supportive throughout this. He's made it obvious that he doesn't want anything to do with Margaret's manipulation and is committed to our partnership. He's also offered to speak with my father personally about what happened, but I'm not sure it would help at this time. The hardest aspect is that I still love my family, despite everything that has transpired. Margaret cared for me for many years and was not always manipulative. Clara is my sister, even if she isn't dealing with this situation well. My father reared me and worked hard to provide for our family. However, I am beginning to see that love does not imply condoning hurtful treatment. Margaret crossed a line when she asked me to give up my relationship for Clara's pleasure. She broke another line when she lied to my father and attempted to manipulate the situation to achieve her goals. I don't know what will happen next. My father has stated that if I do not return home and straighten things out with the family, he will discontinue financial assistance for me. Margaret and Clara are acting as if I was the one who started this whole issue by being selfish and unforgiving. Part of me wonders whether I should just return and attempt to make peace. It would be easier than dealing with all of the strife and uncertainty. But every time I think about it, I recall Margaret sitting across from me in that coffee shop, asking me to break up with my boyfriend so that her daughter might have him. I recall the look in her eyes as she lied to my father about what had transpired. I can't go back to pretending everything was fine. I can't go back to avoiding Clara's emotions or accepting Margaret's manipulation as normal family dynamics. So I guess I'm seeking for advice again. How do you restore your life if your family turns on you for refusing to be manipulated? How do you deal with the guilt of stepping away from folks who say they love you but don't respect your boundaries? Update 2. I wish I could say things improved following my last report, but they really deteriorated significantly before improving. I'm writing from my new apartment, which I share with Ethan, and I finally feel like I can breathe again. After my last post, I was away from my family for almost 3 weeks. During that time, Margaret intensified her efforts to persuade me to return. She began calling my workplace, informing my supervisor that there was a family emergency and that I needed to get home immediately. When my supervisor handed me the messages, I had to explain that there was no emergency and my stepmother was lying. Margaret also reached out to some of my college buddies via social media. She told them I was experiencing a mental breakdown and requested them to persuade me to return home. Several friends called me, concerned, and I had to explain the true situation to them. It was awkward and stressful. The worst aspect was what she did to Ethan. Margaret managed to get his work phone number and called his employer. She informed Ethan's supervisor that he had acted inappropriately with a disabled family member and that the family was considering filing charges. Ethan's employer summoned him to the office the next day for an awkward chat. Ethan had to describe the entire issue to his manager, including presenting text exchanges between us proving we were in a committed relationship. Fortunately, his boss trusted him and recognized that this was a family dispute rather than a criminal matter. However, Ethan was shocked by the incident, which made us both realize how far Margaret was willing to go. That experience convinced me that I needed to take more serious measures. I couldn't continue to live in limbo while Margaret tried to destroy my relationship and reputation. I resolved to write a lengthy letter to my father, outlining everything that had happened, including Margaret's initial request, and all of her following lies and manipulations. In the letter, I told my father that I loved him but couldn't have a relationship with him if he kept enabling Margaret's conduct. I stated that I was willing to keep a connection with him independent from Margaret and Clara, but only if he admitted what had transpired and stopped expecting me to tolerate Margaret's manipulation. I also sent a letter to Clara. I told her that I didn't blame her for having feelings for Ethan, but she needed to understand that those feelings did not give her the right to be in my relationship. I told her I wished she could find happiness with someone who genuinely wanted to be with her, but that person would never be Ethan. I sent both letters and waited. For a week I had heard nothing. Then my father called and requested to meet me for coffee. He sounded exhausted and older than I recall. When we met, my father looked like he hadn't slept well. He claimed he questioned Margaret about what I had stated in my letter. Initially, she denied everything and claimed I was lying to turn him against her. But as he probed her for details about specific conversations, her story began to unravel. My father claimed that the turning point came when he asked Margaret directly if she had ever asked me to break up with Ethan. Margaret eventually revealed that she had advised that I prioritize Clara's happiness, but she argued that it was an acceptable request from one family member to another. When my father asked her why she had lied to him about Ethan and I breaking up, Margaret explained that she had been trying to spare Clara from disappointment and that she believed I would finally see things her way. She claimed she had never planned for things to get that complex. My father expressed regret that he had not believed me right away. He claimed Margaret had always been so skilled at explaining things in a way that made her appear sensible and compassionate that he had come to rely on her judgment above his own intuition. He apologized for comparing me to my biological mother and suggested we concentrate on mending our relationship. I informed my father that while I appreciated his apologies, I needed to see actual improvements before I could trust him again. I told him he needed to set limits with Margaret about her behavior toward me and Ethan, and he shouldn't expect me to sacrifice my own happiness for Clara's emotional needs. My father agreed to those conditions, but he also asked if I would consider giving the family another chance to sort things out. He stated Margaret apologized and wanted to make things right. He suggested that we all get down and have an honest chat about what had happened. Against my better judgment, I agreed to a single family meeting. I told my father it would be at a neutral site, not their house, and that Ethan would accompany me. I also stated that if Margaret lied or tried to manipulate the situation during the discussion, I would leave without giving them another chance. The encounter was disastrous. We met at a restaurant, and Margaret had prepared an entire speech about how much she loved me and apologized for any misunderstandings, but when I pressed her to explicitly state that she had asked me to break up with Ethan, she couldn't. Instead, Margaret continued stating that she merely wanted me to think about Clara's sentiments, or that she had suggested I think about what was best for the entire family. She refused to use the word breakup, despite the fact that it was exactly what she had requested me to do. Clara was even worse. She accused me of being jealous of her connection with Ethan and attempting to keep them apart because I was insecure. She said Ethan had been leading her on by being kind to her, and I was forcing him to pretend he didn't have feelings for her. Ethan eventually spoke up, telling Clara that he was never romantically interested in her and never would be. He explained that he had been kind to her as a friend and as my sister, but she had mistaken his friendship as anything more. Clara burst into tears, explaining that Ethan was only saying that because I was influencing him. Margaret sprang to Clara's defense, claiming Ethan was being unkind to a vulnerable person. She stated she couldn't imagine Ethan would reject Clara only because of her disabilities. That's when I understood that nothing had changed. Margaret and Clara were still living a fantasy in which Ethan secretly desired to be with Clara, but was thwarted by mean, selfish me. They had learned nothing from the previous few months of conflict. I stepped up to leave, but my father encouraged me to stay and keep trying. He stated that families should work through their problems rather than giving up when things were unpleasant. I informed him that I had tried to sort out the problem, but Margaret and Clara refused to accept reality. As we walked out of the restaurant, Margaret told me that she would never give up on her daughter's happiness. She stated I could go away as my real mother did, but she would always fight for Clara. That comment was the last straw for me. Margaret saw me as a hindrance to Clara's happiness, rather than as the daughter she was expected to love and protect. No matter what I did or how much I sacrificed, it would never be enough because Margaret would always choose Clara's desires over mine. Ethan and I left town the following day. We were intending to relocate anyway because Ethan had received a job offer in another city. The work paid better and provided us with a fresh start away from the family strife. We've been here for 6 weeks, and it's been serene. No manipulative phone calls, no guilt trips about family loyalty, and no one asking me to give up my happiness for someone else's. Ethan enjoys his new career, and I found work at a marketing agency that is far superior to my previous position. My father has called a few times. Our chats have been cordial but distant. He keeps hoping that I will change my mind regarding Margaret and Clara, but I have made it obvious that this will not happen. I told him he was free to visit us here if he wanted to keep a connection with me, but I would not be returning to deal with Margaret's manipulation. Margaret sent me a farewell text message last week. She expressed her wish that I was content with my decision to leave my family for a man who would most likely abandon me ultimately. She claimed Clara was heartbroken and blamed me for being selfish and harsh. After that, I blocked her number. I also blocked Clara, who had been messaging me about how unjust I was being and how much I was harming the family by remaining away. The point is, I no longer feel guilty. For years I accepted that my position in the family was to be understanding, adaptable, and willing to make sacrifices for Clara's needs. I assumed it was what good sisters did and what appreciative daughters owed their stepmother. But now I understand that Margaret never considered me her daughter. She regarded me as a resource that Clara might profit from. When I ceased being useful in that way, she was willing to spread lies about me, damage my relationship, and attempt to harm my reputation. Clara never thought of me as her sister. She regarded me as a competitor for Ethan's attention, and finally as a barrier to obtaining what she desired. She was willing to take part in Margaret's deception and manipulation because it served her interests. My father was so committed to keeping the harmony in his household that he was willing to compromise my well-being rather than confront Margaret's actions. He wanted me to continue absorbing Margaret's manipulation so he wouldn't have to cope with the conflict of confronting her. None of that was love, despite everyone's claims. Love does not require you to give up your happiness for someone else's convenience. Love does not force you to accept falsehoods and manipulation in order to maintain family unity. I'm starting a new life with individuals that genuinely care about my well-being. Ethan has never asked me to give up anything for his benefit, and he has never lied to me or attempted to manipulate me. This is what a healthy relationship looks like. I'm not sure if my father will ever comprehend what happened, or if he'll always blame me for splitting up the family. But I have no influence over his choices. I can only manage my own actions, therefore I prefer to surround myself with people that treat me with respect and honesty. Update 3. I'm writing this final update to bring this chapter of my life to an end and to address some of the issues that have been raised. It's been 6 months since I moved away with Ethan, and I can honestly say that it was the best decision I ever made. Life here has been good. Ethan was promoted at his job, and we are saving money to buy a house. I work for a company where my supervisor values my abilities and does not have to deal with family members contacting about bogus problems. We've become friends with our neighbors and joined a hiking group. I never imagined I could have such a normal, quiet existence. My father came to visit us twice. The first visit was unpleasant because he kept bringing up Margaret and Clara, asking whether I missed them and if I was willing to forgive them. He appeared to assume that I had had enough time to recover from what had transpired. I had to explain that this was not about harboring grudges, but about protecting oneself from people who have demonstrated a willingness to lie and mislead in order to obtain their desired outcome. The second appointment went well. My father seemed to realize I wasn't coming back, so he stopped trying to persuade me to reconcile with Margaret and Clara. We talked about other things for a few hours, and it felt like we were back in our typical father-daughter connection. He stated he was proud of the life Ethan and I were creating together, but my father also told me several things that reinforced I had made the right decision to leave. Apparently, once I moved away, Clara was confident Ethan would realize he missed her and return for her. Margaret reinforced this dream, suggesting they drive to our new city to surprise him. My father put a halt to that idea, but only because he was concerned about how it would appear if they arrived up unexpectedly. He didn't seem to grasp that the idea was unacceptable, because Ethan had expressed his feelings clearly, and stalking someone is bad no matter how it appears. Margaret also began telling others in their social circle that I had turned against the family because I couldn't accept Clara's happiness. According to my father, she was portraying herself as the patient mother whose disabled kid was being bullied by a jealous stepsister. Some people believed her narrative, which was not surprising to me. Clara eventually began dating someone she met in an online support group for people with disabilities. My father claimed she seemed pleased with this new person. And Margaret was overjoyed that Clara was finally receiving the attention she deserved. Apparently, neither of them recognized the irony in Clara's ability to find someone who wanted to be with her once she quit obsessing over Ethan. My father asked if I would consider congratulating Clara on her new relationship. I told him no. Clara had cooperated in Margaret's attempts to manipulate and control my life, and she had never apologized or admitted her mistakes. The fact that she had discovered pleasure did not excuse her previous actions. Margaret attempted one final manipulation about 3 months ago. She messaged me through my father, stating Clara was getting married, and asked me to be her maid of honor. The message stated that here was my opportunity to be the bigger person and demonstrate that family was more important than previous arguments. I informed my dad to inform Margaret that I would not be attending Clara's wedding in any manner. I also told him that if Margaret attempted to contact me again through him or anyone else, I would cut off contact with him as well. I had set clear boundaries, and I was not going to let Margaret continue to break them just because she wore a bridal gown during her manipulation. My father was disappointed, but said he understood. He also confessed that he thought Margaret's request was improper considering what had occurred. It was the first time he had directly critiqued Margaret's behavior, and it meant a lot to me that he could now see her clearly. Clara got married 2 weeks ago. My father gave me a snapshot from the wedding, and Clara appeared to be really delighted with her new spouse. I was happy for her, but I did not regret not being present. That wedding reflected a family that had never seen me as anything more than a tool for Clara's advantage. Ethan and I are getting engaged next month. We're arranging a little ceremony for a few close pals. My father will be invited, but Margaret and Clara will not. I've learned that you get to select who observes the most significant moments in your life, and I choose to surround myself with individuals who have earned the right to be present. Some may believe I'm being overly harsh, or that I should have tried more to make things work with my family. But I knew that pushing harder would have only resulted in more manipulation and abuse. Margaret would never have ceased attempting to control my life for Clara's sake. Clara would never have stopped considering me as a barrier to her happiness. The truth is that Margaret and Clara did not love me. They appreciated what I could do for them and made their lives easier. When I ceased being useful in that way, they were willing to spread lies about me, undermine my relationship, and isolate me from anyone who supported me. My father adored me, but he cherished his tranquil household more. He was willing to risk my safety to avoid disagreement with Margaret. That is not the love I deserved. And it is not the love I am ready to accept any longer. I don't wake up every morning wondering what manipulation Margaret will try next, or what emotional crisis Clara will have if she doesn't get her way. I don't have to walk on eggshells or give up my own needs to keep the peace. I don't have to pretend that lies, misunderstandings, or abuse constitute love. Instead, I wake up next to someone who has never asked me to be less than myself for his benefit. I work in an environment where my efforts are valued. My friends respect and support my boundaries and decisions. I have an honest relationship with my father, even if we are not as close as we once were. This is what happens when you refuse to accept hurtful treatment from those who pretend to love you. This is what it looks like when you prioritize your personal well-being over others' comfort. I'm not telling my story to gain sympathy or to persuade anyone that I made the correct decision. I'm publishing it because I wish someone had told me years ago that family members that control and lie to you aren't behaving out of love, regardless of what they claim. I wish someone had warned me that leaving toxic people does not mean giving up on family. It's about protecting yourself so you may have healthy relationships. If family members are asking you to sacrifice your happiness for someone else's benefit, or if individuals are lying about you to get what they want, you do not have to stay and accept it. You do not owe somebody your peace of mind or well-being simply because you share DNA or were raised by them. Margaret cared for me for many years, and I'm grateful. But appreciation does not imply that I had to let her dictate my adult life or ruin my relationship. Clara is disabled and experiences obstacles that I do not have to cope with, and I feel compassion for her. However, her challenges did not grant her the right to my lover or to join in attempts to manipulate me. My father worked hard to provide for our family when my biological mother departed, and I am grateful for everything he did. But his sacrifices did not imply that I had to sacrifice myself to keep his second wife happy. Sometimes the people who claim to love you the most will harm you the most because they believe their love gives them the power to control you. Sometimes walking away is the only way to preserve yourself. I don't think Margaret, Clara, or my father will ever realize what they did wrong. I'm not sure whether they will ever recognize that their treatment of me was wrong and detrimental, but I don't need their understanding or apologies to move on with my life. I have Ethan, who treats me like a partner rather than a possession. My buddies respect my boundaries. My skills are valued at my current employment. I have a future that belongs to me, not to others who believe they know what is best for me. That is enough. That is more than enough. That was all I needed, but I was reluctant to ask for it because I believed I owed others my loyalty, even if they didn't deserve it. If anyone reading this is coping with family members who manipulate, lie, or attempt to dominate their lives, please know that you deserve better. You deserve partnerships based on respect and honesty. You deserve the freedom to make your own life decisions without having to deal with the emotions of others. You do not need to set yourself on fire to keep others warm. You don't have to give up your happiness to express your love. You do not have to stay in hurtful situations simply because it is difficult to leave. This is my final update because this chapter of my life has concluded. I'm no longer the girl who tries to make everyone happy at her own expense. I am not the daughter who tolerated manipulation because she was grateful for a roof over her head. I'm not the sister who prioritizes someone else's desires over her own. I'm simply Olivia, building a life with someone who loves me unconditionally and making decisions based on what's best for me, rather than what's easier for others. It took longer than it should have, but I got here. And if you're reading this and see yourself in my tale, you can do it too.